6 o'clock. We'll try to get this thing started. It's trying to echo on me a little bit, Webb. Get a little bit of feedback. I'll move my phones away from me. All right. All right, guys. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council November 1st, 2021 to order. Up first, we have an invocation by Pastor Landis from Grace Lutheran Church. Pastor?
Merciful Father in heaven, all rule and authority in the kingdoms of the world comes from you, and you hold in your hand all the might of humanity. You have instituted the governing authorities that exist for the punishment of those who do wrong and for the approval of those who do good. Look upon your servants here in the Destin City Council and all that they work with. May all of them who have authority work as your servants and use their authority according to your will and command. Enlighten and defend them by your name, O God. Give them wisdom and understanding, that under their peaceful governing your people may be guarded and directed in righteousness, quietness, and unity. In Jesus' name we pray this. Amen.
All right, up first is agenda approval. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the approval.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion. All in favor?
Second.
Ayes have it, so moved. Item 1A, approval of minutes of October 21st, 2021, special city council meeting. Entertain a motion.
Second.
I got a motion, got a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, take a vote. Vote unanimous. So item 1B, approval of minutes of September 7th, 2021, the regular city council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Let's vote. Ayes have it, so moved. All righty. Under item 2A, we have a distinguished guest, Mr. Alex Fogg, to give us a little update on our artificial reef program and presentation. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all tonight. This is actually the first time I've ever been to a Destin City Council meeting, so it's an honor. While I'll be touching on mostly artificial reef work, I will be touching on some lionfish work and some other projects that we have going on in the destination. So first with the artificial reefs, about a year ago we deployed the SV Dillon. This is a 62, 63-foot sailboat that was actually confiscated by U.S. Customs due to it smuggling drugs from Australia to France. Fortunately, we actually received this vessel for free. We just had to pay for the deployment offshore. So it's a great relationship that we have with U.S. Customs down in South Florida, and we hope to get some larger vessels in the future. This was also deployed in the location that we're calling the boatyard. So we hope to deploy up to 3 vessels in this one location to provide a pretty complex site for fishing as well as diving. All right, so in addition to the wreck that we deployed, we also finished up a large snorkel reef project that was funded by Restore dollars or BP dollars. This is for an additional 325 modules that were deployed at 4 different locations, 2 in Destin, 2 in Fort Walton Beach, and they're in different shapes. So this is actually what one of the shapes is. It's a jet, and it's actually right in the flight line going into Destin Executive. So it's a pretty cool sight. You can see it from the air. This completes our snorkel reef deployment, so there's a total of 8, 4 in Fort Walton, 4 in Destin. And all of these are in about 20 feet of water. I know the fleet uses them to catch a lot of bait, but it's also a great place for people to learn how to scuba dive, snorkel, or just go and try and catch some redfish or pompano, even tarpon in the summertime. Another project that we had, this was funded by Florida Fish and Wildlife, 50-50 matched with tourism development dollars. It was for the deployment of an additional 62 reef structures ranging from 8 foot up to 15 foot. They were deployed at 2 sites out in the large sea. So I guess maybe about 15 miles from the pass, and about 105 feet of water. These structures are performing very, very well. They're in very close proximity to each other in each of these patch reefs, so they provide a really good site to go fishing, and it's a great site to bring a large group of divers if you want to go diving there. And it's in close proximity to a new wreck that we also deployed called the Big Dog. Not too far. The Big Dog. This is a U.S. Air Force training vessel that was donated to us back, I guess, this time last year, but we deployed it back in May. This is in real close proximity to those reefs that I just talked about in about 105 feet of water, and the folks that have actually been out there diving them say it's a great site. It's shallow enough to the sand that you can do a multi-profile dive, but I know folks who have actually been fishing out there. There was actually a wahoo caught there about 2 weeks ago. So it's a great site already, and a turtle showed up about 5 minutes after that thing hit the bottom. The Brannon was the second vessel that we deployed at the boatyard, and it ended up landing about 20 feet, 10 to 20 feet from the Dillon. This is a Navy fast response catamaran that was actually brought down here from Bath, Maine to be turned into a houseboat. Those plans fell through, and they just wanted it off their property, so the Brannon family actually donated it to us to deploy as an artificial reef. It was already pretty much completely clean, so we really didn't need to do much except for bring it offshore. We even left the trailer on it to give it a little more weight. Just pulled the wheels off. The Miss Joanne's actually the newest addition to the boatyard, and that will be going in about a month. This is a 73-foot tugboat. It's actually pretty tall, about 42 foot tall, so it'll provide quite a bit of relief to the location. We hope it lands as close to the Dillon and the Brannon as they kind of landed, but we'll see how the weather and currents and whatnot allow. Over the last 3 years or so, we've been receiving a lot of donated concrete material from different public works groups, old culverts. Eglin Air Force Base, when they get done with some of those large concrete targets that they've been destroying and they're blowing up that you hear up there, they need to get rid of them, and as opposed to crunching them up, they donate them to us. We bring them offshore and deploy them as an artificial reef. There was a project completed using this sort of material back in 2015 and 2017. Those sites are awesome. They're out in state waters. Great site for pretty much every species of reef fish. There's also a number of pieces of material that were donated to us by destined water users, so we're getting a lot of local material, and that material is actually going to be loaded and staged at some point over the next couple of months at Joe's Bayou Boat Ramp, because there's a deep water access that the barge can pull right up, and they can put it right onto the barge. And this one is, so this is a large grant that we'll be receiving this year. It's $1.2 million from NERDA. And it'll be to deploy a whole bunch of prefabricated artificial reef modules out in federal waters. We got a bunch of about $1.6 million worth of NERDA funds about 2 years ago, and we deployed all of that material in state waters. So it's time for us to bring it a little bit further offshore and give the fleet some further destinations to be able to go fishing. The FADs, or the fish aggregating devices. This is a project that is the first of its kind of anywhere in the United States or continental U.S. This was pioneered by a number of folks. Captain Jarvis is one of those folks who really helped get this project off the ground. The first of the FADs were deployed in August 2020, with the second round of them coming in January 2021. These things have been through a lot of tropical storms, and we were wondering how they would actually perform. They did very, very well. Unfortunately, this last October, we actually lost FAD number 6. We've recovered that buoy and did an investigation to try and figure out what happened. And what it looked like happened is there was probably a deep water shrimper that maybe impacted about 1,000 feet down the line, which compromised it. And a lot of folks like to tie up to these buoys overnight to give them a little bit of stability and even do some fishing by just tying up to them. And that little additional stress may have caused the buoy to break loose. Fortunately, we're going to be able to redeploy this, so keep an eye out for the FAD to be back out there in the next few months once the deployment contractor frees up his schedule a little bit. The Emerald Coast Open, for those of you that don't know what this is the large lionfish tournament, actually the world's largest lionfish tournament that we host here in Destin, Florida since 2019. This is a project that we work very, very closely with Florida Fish and Wildlife on. We work with local partners as well in the city to make this a huge event. Back in 2019, we had more than 19,000 lionfish removed over the course of just a couple days. All of those lionfish were sold to the market, and a lot of them ended up in Restaurant Week, which is an opportunity where we provide free lionfish fillets to the local restaurants, and they highlight lionfish as a food fish. It ends up being a hit, and most of the time the lionfish is sold out in the first night, and they're always asking for more. There's a picture of one of the presentations. Sushi and some coconut encrusted. Good stuff. All right, so in 2020, we didn't have the main event for obvious reasons, but in 2021, we kicked off the pre-tournament. The pre-tournament starts in February before the main event that happens in May, and the purpose of that is to allow folks to go out and fish and dive whenever the weather is good and their schedule allows. Those fish then come in, we bring them to Destin. Dewey Destin's actually processes the majority of those fish. They vacuum seal them and they get distributed to the restaurants in May. So it's a great opportunity for us to get a whole bunch of fish way ahead of time so we aren't scrambling to get fish out to the restaurants come May. And again, this is an outstanding partnership with FWC, and even though the weather wasn't that great and a lot of folks didn't participate this year because of that, we still had more than 10,000 lionfish removed in that weekend. All right, so some of the, I guess, last things that are not associated with lionfish or the artificial reefs. We did post-hurricane beach assessments following last year's hurricane season, and we did show moderate sand loss. So that's something we're going to continue to monitor over the future years and see what we can do to actually address that. Sea turtle monitoring and outreach and education. That's something that you're going to see a lot more from us in the coming years. We're going to be doing a lot in the off season and hopefully really partnering with a lot of the local groups to boost the sea turtle stuff because everybody seems to really like turtles. We recently took over the no wake sign inventory and management. So if you've been out on the water recently, you may have seen a whole lot of new no wake signs specifically in the East Pass, Crab Island area. Is it enough signage? No, we're going to be putting out more over the winter time to really try and allow folks to see a sign no matter where they are in the water in the East Pass, Crab Island area. So there's no longer that excuse of, oh, I didn't know. You can at least point to a sign and reference it. We also took on the derelict vessel program, which is tough. Derelict vessels, the definition of a derelict vessel isn't just a boat floating out there that looks bad. It has to meet a whole bunch of criteria. If it's on the bottom, if it's sunk, that's usually a pretty good indication that it is derelict. We're receiving funds from the state of Florida to actually remove a lot of these. In the last 8 months or so, we've removed a dozen, with 4 more being removed here in the next month or so. And that's it. So if there are any other vessels that you think are derelict, please reach out and let me know. We can get that process going because it does take a minute. Let's see, we partnered with the Cobia World Championship this year to actually boost up the Cobia tagging component of that tournament. Cobia tournaments are a huge thing here in Destin in the springtime when they're migrating, and unfortunately the Cobia population is kind of dwindling. So we're trying to do something to keep that tournament alive while not taking a whole bunch of fish out of the population. So by tagging these fish, not only does it allow the tournament to continue, but it also allows scientists to gather really important information about their migratory habits. Because no matter if we regulate them here in Florida and they just swim over to Louisiana and get harvested over there, it's a very difficult situation for those migratory species. Beach cleanups and marine debris removal events, you're going to see a lot more of those here in the coming months. We generally have a beach cleanup in April and the fall. But we're hoping to really start to boost the marine debris removal efforts where we actually bring divers offshore to have them remove monofilament, lead, hooks, and those other things that are accumulating on all these reefs that we're putting out there. So a lot of folks don't know how much of that's actually down there, but it's not that difficult to go down there and actually remove it on a somewhat regular basis. And lastly, with the red tide that we've been seeing recently, we've been working very, very close with Florida Fish and Wildlife to do very regular sampling. So we're going out every 2 or 3 days a week to collect samples from different parts of the destination, from Destin to Fort Walton Beach, to give them that data to provide important information to health officials for managing red tide. So we'll continue to monitor that in the future. It seems right now the numbers are down, knock on wood. Hopefully that stays that way. But that's all I have right now for this update. I know it was quick, but if there's anything else that you all want to hear about, I'm happy to chat.
Got a couple council members who'd like to ask you a question or two. Mr. Bagby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great job, Alex. When's the last time the county surveyed the ECL east of
Put me on the spot. I don't have the number. I can get that to you, though.
Okay. Can you get it? Is there a map somewhere? I went to GIS to try to find it because
There's
there
some
should be a map
data
where
that was
there's-
provided. Yeah, we'll get that to you.
where the ECL and where the mean high water line are.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay,
I can
'cause
get
it's
you that.
going to be an issue here shortly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Ayer?
First of all, thank you for coming tonight, and I'm sad that it took us this long to get you here. As a TDC partner, I've watched you grow your team, grow your experience, and make some wonderful things happen, and I think the lionfish is is a huge story that you don't give yourself enough credit for. I mean, that's a huge change to make it into something people want to catch, want to eat, and educate them on what it is and why we need to catch them and get them out of the water. So thanks for the presentation tonight. Look forward to having you come back more often, okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Be happy to.
Alex, while we have you here, I know you emailed myself and Captain Green, President of Destin Charter Boat Association, requesting a letter to Congress for some appropriations. And at this time, would you like to share what that letter would be about? Because I'd like to have the council's approval to
absolutely.
put
I guess
together
I
that
should've-
letter as mayor of Destin to
Of course.
help you
Yep.
get that appropriation steered our way. So just kind of
Yeah,
share
I'll
with
give a
us about that.
30,000-foot view. I guess I should put that in the presentation. But anyways, it's the Reef Act. And what that allows is for Congress to prioritize decommissioned Navy vessels as artificial reefs, as opposed to them being scrapped. So it'd be a situation like the Oriskany over in Pensacola, where that was a large aircraft carrier that was decommissioned. They cleaned it up in partnership with Escambia County and sunk as an artificial reef. There's a lot of other examples like that on the East Coast, but that's the one that's really close to home. So what this act would do would really boost the possibility of us getting some of these really large vessels here in the destination. And I know that's going to be brought to the Board of County Commissioners tomorrow for them to sign a similar letter.
So
Need just a consensus, or?
just a consensus would be fine. I'll have Catherine help me put it together, and then I'll get it to Alex ASAP.
That's a great idea.
One quick.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
I'll make a motion to approve the letter that's written.
Second.
Yeah, second.
Okay, got a motion, got a second?
One
Jim?
question. I noticed is this just the example, the one to Rubio? You're going to send one to both senators?
Yeah, that was just an example of the one they wrote.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
All right.
He's the
Okay.
sponsor, so that's what we
Okay.
put it together for.
Okay.
It'll be very similar to that, just from us.
To all of them?
Yes.
I mean, obviously,
That would be great.
All right, we take a vote real quick. Ayes have it, you got your letter? Don't go away, I got some other folks who want to chat with you. Kevin?
Yeah, I was just going to thank you for your time and the presentation and everything everyone else said. Been doing amazing work with your position and the county and all the areas around us. I know not just Destin, Walton, everybody. So
Thank you.
thank you very much for what y'all are doing.
Appreciate
it.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, Alex, thanks for everything you're doing, man. I had the privilege of sending you a text message of a tagged Cobia this year, and
Yeah.
I've been hearing your name and hearing a lot about what you're doing, and it's awesome. It kind of reminds me of, when the way that Destin's growing, we needed more places for them to live. The more recreational and charter commercial fishermen we have, the more places we need for fish to live, or it's gonna go away too. So,
Absolutely.
this was one of my, maybe one of the things I was most interested in being involved or being on Destin City Council was this kind of project. So for myself and other people who want to get involved, what avenues, how should we go about getting involved with what you're doing?
So what I can do is I can keep providing updates, and in particular, if you want to be a part of a reef deployment, for example, like when the Miss Joanne's going down, I'll reach out and let y'all know when that's going to happen, and we can try and get you on a boat to get out there.
Mr. Destin?
And I was going to echo the thoughts about what a wonderful job you've done, Alex, because in the last 2 or 3 years since you've been in charge, it's just like an entirely different department. You've done a great job, and I want to also tell you that Destin has a very strong commitment to what you're doing, catching lionfish, cleaning the water, reefs. So if it comes to the point that somebody needs to go look for a little money, I feel certain we will try to support you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you've done an excellent job, and it's not just about the reef building, which you started with. As you can see, it involves the turtle beach cleanup and cleaning up our environment, and that's something that this city definitely cares about. One of the things that I just want to thank you for is this presentation also is to help people realize that a lot of money has been earmarked and spent to do what you've done up to this point, but that's not where you're about to stop. You got a lot more projects in the works, and the return on your efforts, what all these reefs mean to our private recreational anglers and our snorkelers and kayakers, I mean, it really fuels the economic engine of water sports in this whole panhandle of Florida, not just here in the city of Destin. I just want to thank you for that. Rodney?
Thank you.
I just want to say this, it brought to my attention what somebody said that over at the old cement plant, they can pull the barge up there because it's deep enough to load or unload or whatever. That may be something that we want to keep and consider when we design that park and start to build it or lay it out, that we can still kind of gain access to that deep water right there.
And I know that property was actually used back in 2015 and 2017, if I'm not mistaken, to load a lot of that material that Eglin Air Force Base donated to us. I wasn't here yet, but from what I understand.
Dr. Ramswell?
Thanks. I just had sort of a random question building on the Reef program. Is there a point where you would stop sinking vessels and it would become, I mean, junkie's the wrong word, but too crowded, so to speak?
So we have hundreds of square miles of permitted reef area offshore. And here off Destin Fort Walton Beach, we really lack the natural habitat that you have maybe down off the West Florida Shelf, the Keys, the East Coast. So we really depend on artificial reef habitat to I guess, provide homes for fish and keep that fishery strong. The steel structures will eventually break down. So some of those things that were deployed back in the 70s, for example, are breaking down to just a clump of steel. They aren't hurting the environment per se, but they're just not as functional as a reef as maybe something that's been down for 2 years. So us keeping that conveyor belt going to continue to deploy things, higher quality reef habitat. I mean, since the 70s, the quality of reef habitat or the regulations on that habitat has changed dramatically. So the things we're putting down now will last a heck of a lot longer than the stuff that was deployed back then. But the short answer is no, I don't plan on slowing down on the reef deployments.
No, I mean, and it's fantastic. I mean, all these are great opportunities. When the steel starts breaking down, do you try to recover the broken steel, or do you just leave it?
The sand is a wild thing here. It actually covers up the majority of that material, and it continues to break down in the sand and disappears. So and something I'd also like to note is we have really the only private artificial reef program in the whole state of Florida. So we actually provide permits to the fleet in the off-season for them to bring out whatever material they deem is making a good reef, as long as it passes all the environmental inspections that we do. So we work very, very closely with them to allow them to bring reefs offshore to create their honey holes, as long as they're deploying it in the permitted areas that we have. But again, that's hundreds of square miles of area for them to choose from.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, just kind of give a broad overview, the state of Alabama, which has far less square miles of water, they've had a robust reef building program for 25 years, and they still got plenty of places to put stuff out, and they've been at it probably times 10 compared to what Alex has done up to this point. So we got plenty of room for reefs, and like I said, the economic return on this is substantial. So for every dollar you're putting in there, I think we're pulling 100 out.
I hope so.
So it's really, really, really a good thing. Awesome. All right. Any further questions for Alex while we got him up here? Don't be a stranger to our
Awesome.
council process.
Yep.
Hopefully
Let me know.
you'll
I'll be happy
come
to
back
come back.
asking for some help to do another one of your grand schemes that you
Okay.
come up with. You've done a tremendous job. I've
Awesome.
known you since the old FWRI
Yeah,
days.
man, long days. Yep.
You've done a tremendous job for this county in our city. Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you. Y'all have a good one.
All righty then. That was a great presentation. I was interested in it for some reason. I don't know. Item number 3, time for public comment on agenda items that are not public hearings. And we do have a few public hearings tonight, so reserve the comments under public hearings for that portion. You can speak on anything that's on the agenda or even things that are not on the agenda. Everyone will get 3 minutes. Just when you come up to the podium, just state your name and your address, and the clock will start. When you got about 15 seconds left, I'll politely ask you to wind up your thoughts, and then we'll move on to the next person. So, without further ado, I'll throw everybody a wrench. I'll start this way and go that way. Does anybody from this section want to come up forward for public comment? There's not a mad rush, so come on up. Go ahead. Just hit the red button so the light comes on. Just state your name and address, and you got 3 minutes.
I'm Bill Croysdale, and I live here in Destin in Holiday Isle, 606 Magnolia Drive. and I'm also the chairman of the Architectural Review Committee for the Homeowners Association, and the board has okayed for me to come here and to talk to you this evening. Also, this is my first time at a board meeting, so I appreciate you all giving us the opportunity to say something to you all. The Architectural Review Committee is one that looks after the safety and also for the compliance of things that are improved or built on Holiday Isle. And we try to be in harmony, very much so, with the city compliance and the building codes that the city has. We also have our own PCNRs, our own policy and procedures that we try to adhere to, and we're trying to make Holiday Isle a showcase residential community for all of Destin. And I think we've been successful at doing that. The reason I'm here tonight, though, is that we're trying to have cooperation with the city. We're trying to be in harmony with the city, and we actually are trying to do the same job as far as compliance is concerned and making sure that things are done in a safe and efficient and clean manner. We have tried, since I've become the chairman, we have tried to have some communication with some of the departments, and we have not been successful in meeting and sitting down with some of the departments. And we do have issues that are in front of the city and also in front of us that I think we both need to work on in together with harmony. We've tried to talk to the city manager and our RCAM. Patrick has talked to him quite a few times. The last correspondence we got was an email dated October 5th stating that he was going to get back with us very soon. We're frustrated. We have not really had any communication. I really think that our two organizations, the Architectural Review Committee and your compliance and building departments, I think we're in the same, we should be on the same team. We're on the same side, but it seems like we're being rebuffed here. And I'm sorry to say that I have to come to the board with this issue. That's the major issue why I'm here. The other issue is that there's a system out there called the Compass system. It may be friendly internally. It is not user-friendly. Okay. And the other issue is Ordinance 2119 LC. I would like to recommend that there be a workshop because that does impact us. Yeah, but that does impact us directly. I appreciate that. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Up next, anyone from the center?
Mayor, can we hear from the city manager on the response that he talked about?
Let's just do public hearing, and then we got a city manager report, and write a little note to yourself, and you can bring that one up under city manager report. Let's go ahead and get through the public hearing portion, and then I'll recognize you, Mr. Braden. You can bring it up during city manager report. Anyone else from the center? Over here? Come on up. Going once, going twice. Hit the red dot. Hit the red dot. Good to see you, Marcy.
Thank you, sir. Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. I don't even know what to say. Right here in my hand is a letter from your Community Development Department with a map on the back. My house sits in that yellow circle because I'm within 300 feet of the property of where there's going to be a Board of Adjustment hearing on Wednesday. I won't go any farther than that because I can tell you that everything that's in this Board of Adjustment meeting will be negated by both of the ordinances that are before you for first reading tonight. I'll talk about those when they come up.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment portion of this meeting. And we will move on to city manager report. Before we get into item A and B, Mr. Braden. It's fresh on our minds, so
Right.
let's go ahead and take that up.
I just wanted to give Lance a chance to respond to that gentleman's comment about the emails in October 5th that hadn't had a reply yet.
Thank you. Yes, I am aware of the situation, and it has been about since October the 6th or so since I heard from their CAM. And I have staff here that is working this issue currently. And honestly, I mean, as I explained to them earlier before the meeting, we're not trying to dismiss their request. We're trying to get to it in order. And we will get there, and we want to be partners with them too. So this is the first time I met them as of tonight, so I think we can make this work.
And can you tell us what the issue is, what you're working on?
They sent a list of things that they were concerned about, which I felt more comfortable with sending those items to the appropriate staff members to answer those questions. I have access to the list, and I can distribute it to the entire council if you'd like me to.
Yeah, I'd like to know, if you don't mind. I think the rest of the council would. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's all I know.
And it might be a good idea, Lance, when you distribute that list of questions or the issues that they have, let us know who you've contacted on staff to address them, just so for our own information.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Destin?
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, they have some standards that we don't have that they're in charge of enforcing. So is it a breakdown in that, since I mean, we enforce the city standards, but we don't have architectural standards in some of the other things. Are we trying to sort those out to see what it is we can help them with?
Absolutely. There's some nuances. I don't know if Lewis wants to add anything to it, but there are some nuances between our two organizations, and we are trying to govern the same areas.
Good evening. Yes, there was a correspondence that was sent to the city manager, and myself and my staff and Ms. Cobb are reviewing a series of the questions that they've asked, and some of them do address some of the issues that Councilmember Destin just addressed. So there's some overlap of issues. So as part of our review process, we're trying to clearly delineate what our responsibilities are and what theirs is, so that there's a clear understanding of what our role is and what their role is.
The time frame for getting back to them is what?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
So the time frame that we're going to get back to them is,
Yeah, we said by this Friday.
I'm sorry?
We said by this Friday.
Okay, thanks.
All righty then. Lance?
Thank
Take it
you.
away.
And I might add too that, I mean, I was not able to communicate to these folks this Friday. So, I mean, if that's my responsibility, then I take ownership of it. I was not aware that that was the deadline that was set. So I did not communicate it to these folks, so they would not have had that knowledge, to my knowledge. Is that correct?
If I may add to, our building official did meet with the board
With a few of the members of the Holiday Isle Association, yes.
October the 19th, 18th, so.
19th, I'm sorry, 19th, May 19th.
Can you speak louder? They couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I did meet with some members of the Holiday Isle Association Board on May the 19th of this year.
But the letter was sent out October 6th, 7 months later, 6 months later?
Correct. Some of the same questions that were on that request in October to Lance were repetitive questions that they asked of me to during this meeting, so. And
Okay.
The meeting went long, it was like 2 hours, and we didn't get through all the questions either, so that might have been part of this too.
Okay, thank you. All right, you guys ready for Lance? Take it away.
Thank you, sir. Up next, we've got our quarterly investment report. We have the reps from Raymond James, both Brian and Steve are here to answer any questions that the council may have.
There we go. Welcome, good evening. Hey, Brian Howard, Steve Can, Emerald Coast Wealth Advisors with Raymond James.
We'll start with just sharing that there's some new faces to the council. We have a tradition of trying to get together one-on-one and have lunch and kind of go through all the details of it. Actually, whatever you like to, but in regards to council members, Schmidt, King, Hebert, please feel free, and we'll reach out to you as well through Crystal and see if there's some time if you'd like to get together. We've done it with everybody in here before, and we've done it a few times, along the way, as things are always changing in the investment world, apparently. So feel free to reach out to us, all y'all, anytime you want to, and we'll get together and go into the details of everything if you like to, because otherwise we'll have a whole other council meeting of just that if we really needed it.
Although we'll continue to provide, you have part of the packet we provide quarterly in coordination with Crystal, and we'll continue to do so, but always happy to meet with you either to answer your questions here or offline on any of those issues, especially as the faces change.
But for the newer folks, I'd just share that, I don't know, we've been managing the city's reserve funds for 2013, right when the tantrum happened. That was horrible timing, but it's been excellent ever since as far as investment goes. About 4 years ago, we made a strategic move towards CDs, ironically, because that was the bubble in the interest rate environment. So we literally took funds away from the investing vehicles and put it into CDs. That actually ended up being our number one performer for the next couple of years. And then this last, almost a year ago, we made that shift back in because we feel like the churning environment of the interest rate market as it kind of hops along down here on the bottom provides an opportunity for an active manager to take advantage of some swings in the interest rate volatility. And that's working out pretty well too. But in a nutshell, you've got five accounts. You got a CD account that's still got some left in it. The debt service, the maintenance fund, and the emergency maintenance operations are all in the exact same, extremely short-term, extremely conservative, super short and backed investments. And then the alternative investment piece is in our high-quality bond vehicle that has a little bit of a longer look and, of course, over time has better performance logically. Recently, our investment manager with Eagle Asset Management has shifted to going a little longer on the yield curve on the alternative investment. The larger piece that's for longer piece has gone from the duration set for about 3 to about 4 years. And on the short term, he's gone shorter. So he saw an opportunity, and interest rates had hopped up in the short term to lock in some longer duration because he thinks interest rates are coming back down on the long end. In the meantime, the short end is starting to come up some, so he's gotten shorter so he can take advantage of shorter pieces to roll those like you do a CD. If you think interest rates are going up, you don't want to lock in a 5-year CD. You want to lock in like a 3 or 6 month CD so that when it matures, the interest rate is higher, then you can take advantage of that. The current rates, I would also share that it's very confusing because this is mark-to-market numbers. So if you own a CD till maturity, obviously you get that maturity valuation. But it's going to be marking the valuation of that, or I'm sorry, the same thing with the CD or a bond. So if you buy a bond at 2% interest, and it's going to be 2-year hold, and 2 years from now you get your money back. But in the meantime, if interest rates go up to 3, that principal is going to come down, and therefore it's going to look like you're losing money in the bond, when in fact, if you hold it to maturity, you'll get your money back and that 2% along the way. So if you see some negative numbers, especially in the CDs, it's very confusing when you see a CD with an unrealized negative number on it. It doesn't make any sense. That's because we're marking to market to show the current valuation if you were to sell it theoretically prematurely before the end of the maturity.
All of which to say, once again, if any questions about the numbers you see or anything else, we're happy to speak with you anytime or answer any questions here.
I got a couple folks got their hands up if you're willing to take questions now.
Absolutely.
All right. First up, Dr. Ramswell.
Thanks, and you may have answered this as you went on, but I was looking at the valuation of the CD, and like you said, it looks like it's lost more than $1 million, so clearly that's
question.
just the
Great
way.
question.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
That's the CD account was created a few years back. I believe you were here when that decision was made to shift money from the other accounts to the CD account. As some of those early CDs matured and the reinvestment opportunity, the rates were very poor, that money was simply shifted back to the other accounts and not, that's the $1 million you see.
Money did lose $1 million.
Right.
It just shifted back into the alternative investment
Right,
It's
so
a
you
shift
see-
over to the alternative investment piece, you'll see it go up as equally as the CD one went down.
Right, so the other numbers look great, but like if I look at September 30 of 2020, it shows 3.1 million, and then September 30 of this year, 1.9 million.
Right, so the difference was moved into the alternative investment account.
Okay.
Pulled out of that account, shifted to another
shifted
account. So it's just
elsewhere.
from one to the other, right?
So it just reflects as minus 40%, not because that's the change in valuation, that's the change in what you actually kept in that
Correct.
account.
The investments in that account were all 100% profitable, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, but that's the moving between the accounts, but we appreciate the question. Yeah, it
Okay,
doesn't look good.
thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr. Brazier.
Thank you. So I'm looking at this, it's table 2. And I'm seeing that my original, say, $10 million investment as of June 30th, 2021 is almost 15.1 million. But is that based off the maturity of some of these, like the corporate bonds don't mature until 2030? Or is that actually today's numbers?
That was table 2.
Yes, sir.
Table 2.
That is a, city investments as of June 30th, 2021.
1, 2, 2, 3.
Oh, that one, that's the one we have right here. It is.
Could y'all put that up on the screen? Because I know people in the crowd are kind of like, huh? It's hard to gauge, yeah.
It just looks like that's telling me that my investment will be worth $15 million as of 2030.
Okay, no, that's a good question. That is the current value of the accounts as of today. So the number we carry there is always the amount you would walk away with if you simply chose to dump everything and take your cash. That's the current real-time value.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
now
yeah,
I see the same
that-
chart.
I can see why you'd raise a hand over that. It's very confusing to see the monies go in and monies go out, especially when the portfolio manager is buying things, that's a debit, and sometimes that looks like a loss when he's just buying a bond. But similarly, when that one matures, it could look like a credit. It's just flows of money that's coming in and going out.
We do like on that particular chart, the column that's labeled investment results is a column that was created by the firm to try to really cut through the
Third from the right.
That's the bottom line gain or loss compared to the dollar you put in, what's it worth today after everything? And that's the, kind of sorts out the confusion in those other columns.
I thought it was interesting when I was doing the research for this before coming over, was that intra-year, you always see these negative numbers for it, especially when the interest rate market gets volatile. You'll see interest rates hop up, and then you see negative, like it looks like the positions are all losing money. But at the end of the year, I mean, just in the last 2020, all portfolios together was up 3.69, and 2019, all portfolios together were up 4.17. And so it kind of flushes out when the bonds mature and/or at the end of the year when the true valuations come in.
I'd have to say that I think the first time we met, when I first got on council 7 years ago, that our $10 million investment made about a $300 gain. So we've come a long way.
It was a tough year.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
It was so bad. We literally got on board, put the money to work, and the interest rate market skyrocketed. And we were like, oh my God. Portfolio manager is actually a friend of ours, James Camp, and we told him like 6 months later, we're like, we're from the city of Destin. He's like, oh. It was just horrible. It took the rest of the year, but we got it back by the end of the year. But that was a tough way to start. But we've been tracking along pretty good ever since.
Ms. Aber.
Well, ironically, they did answer my question,
Okay.
so thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Mr.
We appreciate
Schmidt.
the questions.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm trying to keep it simple if I can, but this might be a wrong interpretation. So we've contributed $5.2 million this fiscal year.
No, that was just a shift of funds.
Correct, no, that was the contribution from the.
Oh, that's-
right there, yep, that's correct.
We've contributed that.
Right.
We've earned $291,000. Looking at table 3,
that
that's
this
our
one?
earnings on our investment.
Is that this one here?
Just a table 3, I don't know, it's an Excel table, I guess.
That's Crystal's.
What's at the top of the column?
Oh, here we go again.
They have that broken down by fiscal year. We have
Maybe you can
calendar.
speak to that, that's yours.
I don't see the numbers on
Okay,
yours,
yeah,
I
now
just
we
see the
yeah,
numbers
thanks,
on
Crystal.
hers, so.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we see that now.
So we've contributed 5.2 million.
Correct,
We've earned about 291K
correct.
during this year. We have unrealized loss of $250,000.
Correct.
Is that the discussion of the CDs that you're talking about, or where are we losing $250,000? And then I see we have expenses of $58,000, so does that mean that during this fiscal year, we've lost money then, or am I reading this all incorrectly?
That's again, the mark-to-market is going to show you a negative number for where we are on a photograph of the current situation in the portfolio. So again, those CDs that are paying 2, but you can get a new CD now for 3, it's going to show that valuation as having a value that's negative below its par value, what we paid for it. It's still going to mature at what we bought it into, and the only way you could lose that money would be if you liquidated everything in the portfolio, and that even hypothetically assumes that the current principal is what that negative valuation is currently, and it doesn't also include earned interest from the current dividend that hasn't paid out yet.
So are there projections that don't realize those unrealized losses
No, so
that
this is
show
what-
the full
Yeah,
CD
so
percentage?
You remember when we had the whole crash of '08 and they didn't do mark-to-market, or actually, they did do mark-to-market, and then because they required that, it made everybody say, well, now I don't want it anymore, so a car that was worth $30,000 is now worth $3 because nobody wants to buy your car. That's kind of the evil twin to this whole mark-to-market thing. It's kind of one of those things we had to kind of learn to live with. But the reality is, and if we sit down and have lunch over this, we'll crunch through this and really show exactly how it breaks down. But like Steve said, in that one line, it shows investment results on the.
Different chart, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
That's
different
what
chart, but still, it shows you how much money year over year the actual net has been for the city. And it shows currently, again, like I mentioned earlier, year-to-date, it's showing a negative number. But if you look at all the other years prior to now, it was positive, because when it all flushes out, you know, the real math will be what they really value at. Just-
Speaking CPA to accounting professional, it used to be in the for-profit world, the FASB rules, if you're going to hold a bond to maturity, then you don't have to market to market. So I know, no matter what the interest rates do in new bonds, buying and selling, whatever, I invested, they promised me 5%, I'm gonna get my 5%. But in the meantime, other people are issuing bonds at different rates, so they might value mine lower than theirs, right? So, but I'm not necessarily gonna actually lose value unless I sell. So that's, but in the government world, the GASB rules, we have to mark. So it looks like, just like he said, if I went out on the streets and tried to sell these CDs today, even though they're not matured, I would get a low price for them because they would prefer to go buy something that's paying a bit higher. But our plan is not to sell them before maturity. So we will not likely realize that unrealized loss.
Yes,
That's
Rob?
correct, yes. That's correct.
Yes, kind of like cryptocurrency.
That's why we only like to come, that's why
Buy
we only like
low,
to
sell
come
high,
before the
right?
council when interest rates had just dropped substantially, so that all of our unrealized numbers look phenomenal.
Although that was largely the logic
ahead,
that led to the money shifting into and then out of CDs, was
Yeah.
following that same train
We
of
were trying to
thought.
take advantage that
Exactly.
there was a hyperbolic, shift there, and I remember that at the time, the council was very confused as to why their financial advisors would recommend taking millions of dollars out of the market to put into CDs. It didn't go over very well, but it ended up being the best asset class we had for several years after that.
Mr. Bagby. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the original legislative sponsor for our investment policy, I never thought that we would still have the same one 8, 9 years later. And I would like the council's permission to work with Crystal to bring back to you no later than the first meeting in February, a revised investment policy. It will still be for the emergency, for 2 accounts, it probably won't change. The maintenance fund and the emergency maintenance and emergency operating fund. But the other 3 accounts, there probably needs to be some change. I don't know anybody other than this city that's had the same investment policy over the last 9 years. Everybody up here probably has changed theirs a couple of times. So I would just like to become the legislative sponsor for the new investment policy, if the council is okay with that.
So moved.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second to begin a process to change our fiscal policy.
I got a question for Mr.
And our
Bagby.
finance director's over here looking like a bobblehead, so. So we'll go ahead and have a discussion here. So these gentlemen can sit down, seeing how we have a motion and a second. Do you have a question pertinent to that? You guys, I think, if we need you, we'll call you back up, but I think, are you done? All right, thank you, sir.
It's not very, normally we don't get questions, so this is kind of exciting for us.
Oh, okay. We might have a whole bunch more here shortly. All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right, so we have a motion, and it.
That's fine. I was just going to ask Mr. Bagby a question.
Yeah, I was just going to recognize
Okay.
because we're in the discussion part of the motion. So, and you're the only one up at the moment. So go ahead, sir.
Have they been our investment brokers for the past 9 years? So at some point in the past 9 years, has the council been approached about changing our investment portfolio? Because we're the only one that's been doing it for the past 9 years. And
Not in the 3 years, I left in 14. I can only answer up to 14, and they were only up for a year, and so I would.
So I'd be happy. I'm sorry I asked you to sit down, but I guess my question then, knowing this answer, is, because I think I heard you chuckle, so we haven't changed in 9 years, but should we have changed? And if so, why weren't that recommended, or was it turned down?
There's 2 or 3 levels of consideration here. The portfolio manager inside the vehicle is actively changing the portfolio to meet the goals. So if you look at the breakdown of the different investments between mortgages, corporates, agencies, treasuries, and governmentals, that tweaks from time to time. It's not fixed. It's not 16, 20, 42 percentage. Those allocations change. So the portfolio manager is very, very active. The second thing is we did make a significant move when we moved millions and millions of dollars out of the investment into the CDs. Again, it doesn't sound like a very exciting move, but it actually was very, very pivotal, and that was based on our initiative. And then thirdly, to make any structural change to the investments requires a resolution. So the resolution currently is extremely, anal in regards to what we can and cannot do, and we're operating within that window right now. To go shifting from some bonds to a CD and back is pretty straightforward. But if we're going to talk about changing the portfolio accounts, I can't recommend that without it being put in the process of a resolution. I do believe it is time to look at it, but I would say that it's been an actively managed portfolio that we've macro recommended and done major changes throughout the process along the way.
I guess the follow-up is that if over 9 years you thought that we needed to make a change and do a new resolution to change something, I would assume that y'all would recommend that to the council at that time. Like my individual advisor, when he wants to make a massive change or whatever, he would come to me. So
yeah, I would.
And I am fresh to this council this year, so just asking the questions.
It's a behemoth. To recommend a substantial change is going to take this council 6 to 9 months potentially to get that done anyway. We have been able to move easily within the barriers, as I mentioned earlier, from bonds to CD and back. To recommend changes, I would say substantially. Number one, this is news to me about wanting to look to make a change because we can't speak openly with all y'all. We can one-on-one and hint and nod and, say, hey, it might be a good idea too, but it needs to come from within your council to suggest and charge us with a consideration toward making substantial changes.
All right. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. And I would just observe that the policy is strictly within the purview of the council. And they can tell us what to do inside the policy. but the council is completely in control of that. And I've been pretty happy with the performance that they've done. They've been 3 to 4% in these past times is not bad, but I'm always ready to listen to something that's innovative. And Ms. Strickland and I'm sure Mr. Bagby will bring some interesting concepts to us. I'm a fairly conservative guy, but I'm willing to listen to anything that is going to make more money for us.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you. Would that not be, and I'm not speaking to the current staff and the current city manager, but would that not be something that the city manager or staff would bring forward to this council every 2 or 3 years or so, saying that we need to, or is that just something that the council's got to come up with? I mean, it just seems like the city manager, and I'm not, it's going on 9 years now, I'm not talking about Lance, I'm talking about the city manager would say, look, this is something we may need to look at, you guys may need to change the policy. Or, I mean, is that really lies on the council to come up with not only this, but other things within the city?
I would think that it would come from our new finance director after, that's her expertise.
Yeah, to be honest, I've been here barely a year, and this is actually in my top 10 list of items that I wanted to address with the city.
Yeah, that's why I said first off, this is not towards our staff or towards city manager, but it's been going on for 9 years. Shouldn't we have had somebody come to us before? Like Chris was talking about doing?
It should be brought before council on a periodic basis, just for you to review the policy, to be reminded of what it is. And at that time, that would be the best place to recommend changes that you might want to make to the policy. But yeah, I agree with you. It should be something that's reviewed periodically.
Okay, because I'm just wondering, what else do I need to be looking at or looking for myself?
Go read the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
Well, I think Jim is on. I think Jim's on it. He's doing it from the council level, saying, after getting this briefing from our financial folks, he's taken that initiative. He's kind of beaten her to the punch a little bit by doing this. So, Dr. Ramswell, I think you were up next.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and y'all might remember this, but when Scott Fisher was mayor, I believe he did bring something up because he had a financial background or something. And didn't we make some changes when he was mayor?
Thank you. Yes, and to speak from our view, there's 2 moving parts. One is the city's investment policy, which, as you mentioned, is owned by the council, governed by some of the state statutes that we have summarized there, because there are some handrails around that, so to speak, on what kind of leeway you do have. But then the next level that we spend a lot of time looking at is our own flexibility within the current IPS to do things like a CD or the state's prime funds or the investment bond accounts we have now. And so that was the time when, within the current investment policy, which in my opinion is actually pretty broad, you do have a lot of flexibility within, almost as much flexibility as the state provides anyway, to do a lot of different things. And so at that time, that's when we did sit down with both the mayor, the director of finance, some of the council, and look at hypothetical alternatives to what was being done. The result of that was the only good idea we had to really strongly suggest was the CDs. The other things that were vetted were determined to be not really worth the risk profile. Looking back, I think that was a great decision, but that was what happened at that point.
Yeah, I brought it up because I knew it had been a while, but I didn't think it had been the 9 years.
No,
because I remember Mayor Fisher did something, so that may have been 4 or 5 years ago.
The CD account was opened in 2017, that's been 4 years, correct?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And that was after about 6 months of some meetings and back and forth and a couple of council meetings, correct?
Thank you.
All right. We got a motion and a second, and I still got a couple folks online here. Mr. Bagby and then Mr. Braden, are you done? Okay, Mr. Bagby, you got last call here before we take it to a vote.
Thank you, Mayor. And just, Rodney, you're right. And this is one of the things I'd like to see us get back to doing. In previous councils, we reviewed everything about every 3 years. So the city attorney's contract, landscaping contract, somebody we had a schedule, and we reviewed our investment, we really didn't have an investment policy, to be honest with you, before 2013. So we ought to, and we had this concept of legislative sponsors. So somebody took all the roads and streets and sidewalks, and somebody took all the TDC things, related things, and Mr. Destin and Captain Wines were the experts down on the harbor, and if they brought something to the council, and they said, this is what we need to do in the harbor, that's what we did in the harbor. I mean, because everybody had their own area of expertise. And so, yes, we should be reviewing, but it should be us. Those are our policies that we tell the staff. And I have talked with Crystal, and I have talked with Lance about doing this. I think since I came back on the council, because this was one of the things it was after y'all's first presentation when I came back on the council, and I was like, wait, I can't believe you still have the same policy that we had 9 years ago or whatever. So you're correct. I think we should do that, but we have to do that. It's not the staff's going to tell, you should redo or review the landscaping contract, or review the city attorney or the land use attorney or whatever. We should review it all. That's what I think we do.
You mentioned y'all had a schedule. I'd love to see if we can resurrect that
I think it was
somewhere.
just, we were letting 3-year contract, my memory is, and Webb or Lance may remember that most of our contracts were either 1 year with 2 options to renew. So boom, guess what we do in that 3rd year? We renew it. Jerry's contract, I remember we reviewed it because, we just had a different thought. Yeah, it was time to review it, I guess. That's all I'll say about
All right. Thank you, Jim. Is that all you had? That's all I had. Okay, well, we have a motion, we have a second, and without further ado, let's take this to a vote. That vote is unanimous, so moved. All righty, Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple quick announcements. On Saturday, November the 6th, this Saturday, the annual Pinfish Classic will be held on the docks behind AJ's for ages 0 to 14. Pre-registration is required, and the cutoff date for pre-registration is Friday, November the 6th. And there will be 2 starting times to accommodate more kids this year. The first one being at 7 a.m., the second one being at 8 a.m. And like I said, you do need to sign up in advance. You can do so by calling the Community Center at 850-654-5184 or emailing recreation@cityofdestin.com for more information. Secondly, we have a holiday on November the 11th, Veterans Day, and all city facilities will be closed in observance of Veterans Day. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Lance. Well, it's only 7 o'clock, so we don't need to take a break yet. So, Mr. Bowman, would you like to take it away, and we'll start our hearings?
Let's do it. All right, first off, we got 5A. This is the second reading of ordinance number 2122 CN, an ordinance granting to Gulf Power Company, its successors and assigns, an electric franchise, imposing provisions and conditions relating thereto, providing for monthly payments to the city of Destin, and providing for an effective date. And this is a public hearing, Mayor.
All righty then, Ms. Hebert. Yeah, let me, we'll do motions after we have our public comment period on this. Seeing how this is a public hearing, there is an opportunity for the public to speak on this ordinance 21-22 CN. At this time, I'll open up the public comment portion of the hearing. Is there anyone that would like to come to the podium and make any comments? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period, and I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to move that ordinance number 21-22-CN be approved on second reading.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any comments from the council members? Mr. Destin?
It appears the agenda says first reading under that heading. Am I reading that wrong? And this is, I understand this is second, but if you look at,
The subject says first reading.
That's exactly what I'm,
So I think the,
yeah, I'm pointing out that that is a mistake. It's not.
so the agenda item report, I think, says first reading, because I think it was just copied and pasted over, but the ordinance itself says second reading, and the item itself
Just
says
want to
second
make sure
reading.
we weren't making a.
Nope, and it's been corrected to add what y'all added in the last
Okay.
meeting.
Thank you for your due diligence, sir. I didn't say it. Mine doesn't say that. Mine just says second. So, all right. So, is there any other comments? We have a motion. We have a second. Seeing none, let's go ahead and take this to a vote. A lot of work went behind this. Mr. Bagby? Push your button. You're chatting? It's not working. There we go. Oh. Hit it again. Enter. It's confirming it. I love it. Yeah, that's not going to work. We need the Jeopardy music at this stage in the game. It's nothing like putting Webb on the spot. You know, if we had lithium batteries, we probably wouldn't have this problem as much. I got a meeting in the morning. All right, we're going to do it manually. Mr. Braden?
Yes.
Dr. Ramswell?
Yes.
Mr. Destin? Mr. Bagby?
Yes.
Ms. Abear?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous, so moved. Congratulations to all the representatives of Gulf Power, Florida Power and Light, and our stalwart attorney who's represented us over the last 2.5 years. Thank you, Shep. All righty then. We got that out of the way. This is the first reading of the next one. Kyle, take it away.
So for 5B and C, let me throw it down to Ms. Kopp first.
So on these two items, the Community Development Director has received requests from Holiday Isle and also an LPA recommendation to workshop these two ordinances. Staff does not object to these two requests, so therefore we are recommending that the City Council forego first reading of these two ordinances tonight and instead direct the City Manager to set a workshop date. If council prefers to proceed with first reading tonight, staff is here and can present the ordinances.
I'll move that we direct the city manager to set a workshop date.
Second.
All righty then. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion about having a workshop for these two items? Seeing none, let's go ahead and take, Mr. Bagby, you good?
I don't even have my thing. I was just to get out. Thank you.
You can't vote.
All right. Everybody ready? Let's go ahead and put this to a vote. The vote is unanimous, so moved. I guess we'll select a date. Lance, give us a doodle poll, I guess, and we'll set it up. Does anybody have any request on a date for such workshop? We'll just leave it up to staff then. All right.
I mean, I would like to see it before Thanksgiving, if at all possible. We don't need to kick this can, no?
It's not, what we want to do is come back to you with something that probably includes some other comprehensive related issues dealing with building heights, so we probably are going to need a little bit longer than that.
Maybe before Christmas?
We can try for that. It may be January, but we can try for December. It's tricky with the holidays and
Yes.
the agendas.
I'll be in Kansas till the 10th. Right, Rodney? Early January, if we're going to have a workshop for you non-hunting people. All right. We'll do the best you can. Thank you. All right. Kyle.
We're going to
So-
skip down to 5D since that workshop takes care of both 5B and C. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2123 CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to livery vessels, providing for findings of fact, providing for a 6-month extension to ordinance 2033 CN, temporary moratorium on livery vessel permits, directing staff to develop recommendations for regulation of livery vessels, providing for severability, providing for expiration of moratorium, and providing for an effective date. And this is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Seeing how this is a public hearing, I'll open up the public comment portion of this hearing. And does anyone want to come and have a word? Come on up.
Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to have a voice in this proceeding. My name's Kimberly Cole. I am an attorney based in Okaloosa County, and I'm here representing the interest of several local businesses who operate out of the Destin Harbor as livery vessel owners. I'll start by saying that my clients oppose the moratorium and the restrictions on the number of livery vessels that was put in place in April of 2019, and therefore oppose any extension to that ordinance. The ordinance, as it was passed in 2017, initially called out 2 areas of concern. One involved issues of overcrowding, and the second related to the environmental issues, specifically the water quality in and around Destin. Later, it was decided to have the Corps of Engineers get involved by performing a harbor capacity study to identify the carrying capacity and the existing and future use of the Destin Harbor. While on the surface, these appear to be legitimate concerns, the city only called out one specific type of business to impede and control by limiting the number of permits issued for livery vessels only. These concerns brought no restrictions on fishing vessels, parasail operations, for-hire tour vessels, commercial vessels, or private vessels, all of which contribute greatly to the amount of traffic within the harbor. Limiting the number of livery vessel permits raises questions of undue restriction on navigation that specifically targets one subset of businesses in this area. We certainly understand safety concerns, and the state has regulation methods in place to oversee the rental of livery vessels and to minimize safety concerns that are raised by renting vessels to others. Specifically, we've got Florida Statute 327.54. It's quite specific in the number of persons per vessel, the age of the renter, the instructions that must be provided to the operator to educate them on characteristics of the vessel, safety, local waterways, among other things. There are also insurance requirements that these businesses must meet, and there are criminal sanctions for those operators who violate these laws, just as those laws apply to other vessel operators engaged in fishing or recreation on private-owned vessels. To further complicate the city's position on what is really going on in the Destin Harbor, we now have action where the city voted to approve a new marina. So, we've got, on the one hand, the city takes the position that there are too many vessels using and operating out of the Destin Harbor, and then completely contrary to that position, the city just recently approves the development of Point Mezzanine, which will bring 53 additional full-time vessels within that body of water.
Your time's up, but there's nobody here in this public hearing, so I'm going to give you another minute, okay?
Thank you.
If that's okay.
Councilmember Schmidt?
Is that okay?
The 3-minute limitations, that apply to regular public hearings?
It has in the past.
Yes, it does.
It has in the past.
Several parties, so I
Yeah.
would.
That's why I was going to give her more time.
Thank you. I won't be here 30 minutes. No.
Well, you know, attorneys can be a little long-winded.
Not me.
Okay,
No.
go ahead.
So we have the approval of 53 additional full-time vessels within that body of water, and at the October 18th City Council meeting, Councilmember Schmidt also actually raised concerns that that the council was approving 53 new slips without having the data of that harbor capacity study. Please do not misconstrue my client's position by raising this point. My clients are not even opposed to the new development. They are all for free enterprise and fairness in business regulation. They do, however, believe the city is targeting one industry by raising concerns relating to one business, but ignoring those concerns relating to another. Limiting the amount of permits is not a solution to any of the problems raised here. There are other ways to regulate issues of safety. Through the permitting process, you have the information of each vessel that is rented out. If an incident occurs, that vessel can be traced right to the business, and a review of the policies of that business can be conducted as it relates to operation instructions provided to the renter pursuant to Florida Statute 327.54. If the city finds that business's policies lacking, then direct steps can be taken against that business. Punishing the entire industry in Destin for the perceived safety infractions of a few is too broad of a restriction on this trade. We are all for a study of the harbor, but to continue to restrict this type of business without the data to back it up is unacceptable. We understand the challenges faced by many organizations and businesses because of COVID and how that flows over to even the Corps and their ability to perform the study, but the city shouldn't just keep kicking the ball down the road with the restriction in place, and you should not just target one facet of boating traffic. For these reasons, I respectfully ask that you continue pursuit of the study with the Corps, but lift the moratorium to allow for these businesses to pursue their trade, which is regulated in so many other ways by other statutes and laws within the state, and when the data from the study is available, that a comprehensive plan for the regulation of harbor use is formed that is fair and reasonable to all industries.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else would like to come up? Hit the button. Name, address.
Jimmy,
You got 3 minutes.
748 Benning. You
Thank
guys
you,
talking about investing that $5 million, invest in one of my ice cream boats, I'll get you a bigger return than what he was giving you, okay? All you guys are doing, everybody up here while she was talking, didn't listen to him. I can go down everyone and didn't listen to her. But by pushing the moratorium out there in the harbor, all you're getting ready to do is make a bunch of people rich in Fort Walton. You guys talking about money? Jamie Neighbors got a 50-boat pontoon boat coming in Fort Walton. He's having it built right now. AJ's is over there, got 100 boats coming at you. So you're not stopping anything. All you're doing is limiting the business people here in Destin from making any money. You're pushing it. Them boats are coming here. Trust me, they're coming here to Destin. So when you guys say, you know, no more pontoon rentals or whatever, I do charters. I'm just telling you that they're coming. No matter what you guys do here, they're coming. So you can either get Fort Walton, Shalimar the money, or you can put it in your pockets. You guys talking about investments? That's a sure investment right there.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Come on up.
You want my name and address again?
Please, for the public
Marcibel,
record.
3 Gulf Breeze Court. Hate being a fence sitter. I see what she's saying. I understand why we have a moratorium. I hear what the lady behind me saying. Like, what? We have an impact study that we haven't even finished. And we're going to hurt these people. I say it every time I come up here. It doesn't matter what the industry is. There are always bad people in the industry. It only takes 1 or 2 to ruin the bunch. And I am so tired of our city being inundated with bad players that ruin it for everybody else that want to play by the rules. I don't know. I'm a rule follower. What can I say? Thanks.
Thank you, Marcy. Anyone else? John?
John Stevens, 4025 Indian Trail. I wasn't even going to talk, but more or less thinking about the moratorium and actually parking that's really available on each property. I believe most of the properties are maxed out with their parking anyways, so I don't know how the moratorium is really going to affect the current businesses that are in place if there's no parking. That's all I got.
Thank you, sir. Good point. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none others, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of it, and I'll entertain a motion for discussion.
I want to make a motion, but I imagine that it might have to be kicked back to the process of redoing the ordinance. So I don't know if I need to just wait to have this ordinance done first, or
I would
throw out
suggest
a
telling us
motion.
your goal, and then
Sure.
we'll give you input.
My goal is that there are a lot of great things said by the attorney and many people. I've spoken to industry people about the moratorium as well. My issue, though, is as I stated at the last meeting, is what we did the last meeting, not taking into consideration a harbor capacity study. Completely understanding the two different industries, livery vessels, full-time boats. I get it. I'm not talking about charter boats, not talking about any of that stuff. So, but the general fact is we have a harbor capacity study that we've spent $250,000 to study, and the Corps put $250K. And I think that until we get that study, if we're going to put the emphasis that we say that we're putting on it, I think we should pause everything in the harbor except for single residential family homes and docks behind those homes. I think we should pause a business adding additional docks behind their business to put more boats back there. I think we should pause any potential development that wants to put docks. We should pause boats that are wanting to add to the current docks that aren't already there until the harbor capacity study is done, so we can really understand everything happening in the study. So that's my goal.
If that is the goal, your motion would be to modify the ordinance to include all, I don't know if you mean all vessels, but you mean all docks other than single-family residential docks. So you definitely mean multifamily residential docks and other commercial docks. And I don't know if you mean all vessels or all uncaptained vessels, or what you exactly meant on that part.
I want to pause all things in harbor except for single residential houses bringing their docks behind their single residential house.
That's your motion.
So I'd like to make the motion to adjust the ordinance, because that's going to be a rewritten ordinance, right?
Correct.
So I move to rewrite the ordinance to include a moratorium on all items in the harbor except for single residential docks.
I'll second that.
I got a second for discussion.
Do we need to identify both the north and south side of the harbor? Or keep it vague?
Just his motions for the entire harbor. And I have a second, so time for discussion. Seeing how we got a second. Mr. Braden, you're up first.
All right, thanks. My thoughts on it, and I agree. I couldn't make the last meeting when we voted on the Marina because I was in New Jersey and couldn't get home. But if I was here, there was no way I would support that motion that night, just because what was said here tonight, that we're doing a harbor study, and we approve a 50 slip Marina or 52, whatever it is. I mean, it's, you know, once that's done and get the harbor study done, if it comes back and says, you know, well, you're not at capacity and you can support another 50 boats or 60, then, you know, and if everything's met with that development order, then you pass it. But I wouldn't have supported it that night. And I agree, you know, on that and the livery vessel. And I was thinking the same thing that John was talking about the parking and a lot of the applications that were approved this past year. I'd be willing to bet that if they were looked at by an independent person and really went down there and studied it and knew for a fact what was going on, a lot of them wouldn't have passed because they don't have the parking that they say they have. So a lot of them couldn't get additional boats because of the parking. They couldn't have qualified for it. But then on the other hand, if Keith Howard's property, he tore that building down, which I've heard he's talking about tearing it down because he's tired of paying taxes on it. There's nobody in it. If he tore that building down and ran 10 charter boats off, he could put 40 pontoons back there. And he's probably got the parking for it. So we don't need that either. You know, maybe other pieces of property. But then again, We don't need to be approving marinas. We don't need to have people come in and put two pieces of property together, which they can do, combine their property and extend their docks out there. They're 200 feet that they can legally do, and park more boats there as well. So, I mean, that ain't right either. So I agree with the motion. It's either all or none. It's, like I said, I just don't know how we can approve the 53 slip marina when we got a harbor study going in and everything's been based off that harbor study. You know, we gotta wait for the harbor study to get here. We gotta wait for the harbor study. So, that's my thoughts on it. Thanks, Mayor.
Dr. Ramswell. No, I'm sorry, Mr. Destin. And then Dr. Ramswell.
Okay.
I can't figure out it more.
That was,
Nope, you were right. It is Dr. Ramswell. I was correct. Every time I touch the button, I get screwed up. Dr. Ramswell, you have the floor, ma'am.
thanks. You know, when we look at zoning and we talk about zoning different properties, we're always told you can't spot zone. And I kind of liken that situation to what we're doing here because we're singling out an industry. And so I have to say, I concur with what Mr. Schmidt has said and Mr. Braden has said that, you know, how fair is it for us to pick one industry but allow others to continue to add to their fleet? So I'm in favor of the all or none, whichever direction the rest of the council decides, you know, pending our discussion, to head in. And then I also had a question in terms of the capacity study. When that is going to be done, do they look at the size of the vessels coming in? So if there's a 100-foot boat, does that equal 5 pontoon boats? Or is there some sort of formula, or is it one boat, one pontoon, one, are they all equal in that consideration? Does anyone know?
As part of the study, they will look at all the boats that are coming in and make determinations based on the overall capacity of the place. I couldn't tell you right now what formulas they use. They did the same thing in Key West, so that's part of what will be unfolding as we proceed. We're only looking at probably end of the spring time period for us to have substantive information to start bringing to council and the committee.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I have. I made my point, so.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Generally, an ordinance is supposed to address one subject. I'm not sure what in the world, how many subjects we're trying to address with this. We're not going to allow more docks. We're not going to allow more boats in the existing slips. I'm very confused about what it is we would be doing here. The proper way to go about this, if the council believes that it should go forward, is to instruct the land use attorney to bring back an ordinance that would put a moratorium on new dock construction. And if you can include not allowing 2 boats in one boat spot because they're smaller or whatever the intent of that is, yeah, or 4, or however many the number is, you could make that part of it. And the other thing I would observe is, in addition to, I'm not sure this is a single subject, there's no notice in this agenda to anybody in town that we may be looking at stopping all dock construction in the harbor. That's another problem that is probably legally questionable. I know for sure it's ethically questionable to put that on without putting the public on notice. So while it may have merits, I couldn't support it tonight.
Just to respond to this, if there are any changes to the ordinance, it starts back over on first reading and is noticed again. So whatever changes are made, whether it turns into one ordinance or 2 ordinances or a modified ordinance, it's renoticed, so the public will know.
Up next is, yes, Ms. Aber and then me.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification, because Rodney wasn't here, I just wanted to make sure it was very clear the 53 docks were approved because the condominium for the owners couldn't be built on the land that they needed to stage all the docking, and it's going to be anywhere from 2 to 3 years before those docks can be occupied, because until the building is constructed and has passed all ordinances and requirements and inspections. So those 53 docks, I know it sounds terrible up front, but if you look at all of the information, the people that are doing our harbor study are the ones that also had to approve the developer's request for those 53 docks in the harbor at that end, what the depth was, the severity of the environment of the water. So that's apples and we're talking oranges. So that dock thing is 2 years away from putting boats at it. But I do agree with Kevin's idea that we've got, I think, shrimp boats and captain charters, and they're allowed to continue to add on to their businesses, and we're just putting a limit to the livery vessels because there are a bunch of civilians that don't have any captain license, and they drive and they get drunk and they don't get caught, but they run amok and whatever the craziness is. That's why it began as a livery vessel. Let's get that studied, but it's kind of morphed into, we're going on a couple years and getting the study done. So I agree that we should put a moratorium on all boats being put into the harbor, whether they're extra shrimp boats, extra charter boats, extra livery vessels, make it fair across the board. And I don't know if we could do that. And then if you decide no more docks, then make that a second ordinance so that everybody can come and speak their term on it. But I agree with Kevin. We definitely need to change the ordinance so that it does just stop all boat access continuums into the harbor.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mayor, my response to that would be that should have been tabled. If it's going to be 2 years or 3 years before boats are going to be there, or if it's even built, it should have been tabled until the harbor study was completed, was my thought.
Well, it wasn't, so that's water under the bridge at the moment. My turn, and I'm going to be real open and honest about this because I think Kevin's motion, although admirable, I wouldn't support it if I had a vote, but I don't. But I can make comment. To do the motion, if we were to execute that motion, if it passes, I think is going to be exactly what Mr. Destin said, to halt all construction, all development on the harbor without publicly noticing the meeting that this was going to be brought up is a whole different ball of wax. So it would probably put us in bad legal footing. But what I want to bring up is the harbor study is not about just how many vessels can be on the water at any one time. I don't know if any of you have listened to or been to any of the harbor capacity study meetings by the civilian-appointed group that's doing this, but they've actually talked about moving the channel in the middle so the southern docks can be expanded to provide more opportunity for the charter industry and commercial docks. And to compare that marina that won't be built for 2 or 3 years and to what goes on the south side of the harbor is you can't compare that. East Pass Towers, Sandestin Yacht Club over there at where one of my customers docks his boat. Those boats might leave 3 or 4 times a year. The real busy ones might leave their dock 20 days out of the entire season. So 53 slips. To compare that with what's happening every day on the south side of the harbor, especially with the livery vessels that are running 2 trips a day with 25 boats for 120 days out of the year, you can't even compare when you're just talking about the traffic part. But one of the things is I think our staff and land use attorney was making that a 6-month extension just to give that time frame of that harbor capacity study to be finished. In that harbor capacity study, one of the things, the main thing that we're supposed to get out of it is what do we want the harbor to look like in the future? Whether it's moving the channel, the type of development that's going to take place, how our community is going to utilize that harbor. That's all part of that study. It's not about just X amount of boats or what kind of boats. It's a big picture. And so the moratorium that has been in place has not prevented one single guy from doing business in this town and or being profitable. All the livery vessel companies have been doing a very good business for a number of years. Well, actually, since the moratorium, it hasn't gotten worse. If they want to do better, they can always raise their prices because they're the only game in town. So there's actually had the moratorium has protected them from intrusion from other outside sources. But lastly, and this is the part where I might get a little emotional, the original intent of that moratorium was because the people that were on the Harbor Board Advisory Committee were very concerned about what was happening on the south side of the harbor and what was happening to our charter and our fishing industry and our heritage that founded this city. That sign says, "Welcome to the luckiest fishing village in the world." I don't think those people, and myself personally, want that sign to be "Welcome to the largest water sports rental village in the world." And I think if we ever went to a public referendum or a vote of whether we want more livery vessels in Destin Harbor, I don't think it would turn out very good for the industry. In fact, probably they would want less. So, me personally, and what I saw as a business owner and a legacy fisherman in this community for 43 years, is where there used to be a 6-passenger charter boat and a captain and a mate feeding 2 families in a small fishing business that actually contributed to our heritage and our community, turned into 4 12-passenger pontoon boats, which turned into 12 12-passenger pontoon boats, which turned into 25 12-passenger pontoon boats. And each one of those slips, instead of feeding 8 families, was feeding 1. Had a couple workers, put gas in them and launch the boats. So I got a problem. If I had the ability to make a motion to vote, my motion would be to make this moratorium permanent. It would do 2 things. It would preserve the heritage of this community, and it would also benefit the people that already have permits and businesses here in Destin, because they may go over to Fort Walton Beach. More power to them. But the guys that are going to get the most for their trips are going to be right here in Destin, and they're protected. It's like having a gold medallion with the New York taxi cab, and those things are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So part of your argument is valid, but part of your argument is not. And for me, the heritage of this community is the reason why I ran for mayor, is to make sure that the fishing industry was not left on the back porch, that they would always be front and center. And that's what this whole argument is about. And I totally don't support Kevin's motion for it. I think that our staff was trying to do the kind thing by giving a 6-month extension to allow that harbor capacity study and give us more time to think about this argument. So I hope that you don't support this one and you support the 6 months moratorium until we can have further discussion about it. But that's my argument. Thank you very much. Next is Mr. King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for speaking from the heart. I'm torn. What kind of time frame what you're talking about,
I'm going
Mr. Schmidt, what kind of time frame does that have? This is a completely separate motion. We're putting a stop. You're wanting to put a stop on everything but single-family residence boat docks for how long?
The goal is, Mr. King, is to put pause on anything that's going to add additional usage in our harbor until the harbor capacity study is done. And that's apparently maybe 6 to 12 months. So it goes along with the same timeline.
Not an argument, but I think the thing that I was most, at our planning and visioning session, one of the things I was most passionate about was having a city pier, city dock that was multiple slips that if it passed today, I'd want to move forward with it. So I can't support what, and that's not even on the table, but I understand where you're coming from, and I share the same sentiment as you and Councilman Braden about the Marina, but that's for another. I don't know, maybe that's for another time. Let me get.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Bagby.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I may be the only one that wasn't involved in all these discussions, so I really have a bunch of questions. I guess first question is for the planning department. If you stop this, how many development orders are in the pipeline around the harbor that would be affected if we said we're stopping everything? How many dock permits do we, how many?
Your mic.
I'm sorry, you would not affect existing development orders, none of them. So it would only affect new applications if you enacted a new moratorium affecting anything beyond the existing. So at this time, any new applications that came in, once the ordinance would pass on second reading, they would not be able to construct a dock, for example, or add any vessels to the harbor under the current motion once the ordinance passed. But existing development orders wouldn't change.
So really, and we think we'll get the harbor capacity study in the next 6 months.
So the reason we recommended 6 months was because we believe we will begin to get information from the Army Corps at that time. We don't believe we'll have everything, but we were trying to end the moratorium as quickly as we could, and we hoped that that initial amount of information might be enough for the City Council to make a decision on how they wanted to proceed. If not, we would have to ask for another 6 months, but we were hoping to try to tie it up and end the moratorium within 6 months if we could.
Do we know how many boats are currently in the harbor?
No. Joey?
Are you talking about liveries or?
Nope, boats. We're going to stop all
Without
docks except single-family residences, so how
I don't
many
even want to
boats
try
do we
and
even
guess.
have now?
It's well over 500.
Okay. The line, the bottom line there is, we don't really know.
We do not know.
And it can change every day, because some of the people that have places that may not have their boat there, may have it stored or may have it over in Alabama, they could bring it back over here. You know, I agree, the marina is a red herring. The marina's not going to be here and for another 2 or 3 years. I mean, I appreciate, is it Ms. Cole? Okay. You know, you're bringing that up and it sounds good, but it's really a red herring. And the approval of the marina, you know, we've already done that. And I agree with those who say, you know, we need to move on from that. I do agree with Ms. Kopp that, yeah, if we do this ordinance as proposed by Councilman Schmidt, that it would be noticed and we would be back here at square one at the next meeting, and we would probably have a really full room, okay, on both sides of the issue. Ms. Cole listed all the safety regulations, and I asked the staff in my pre-brief today, who enforces that? And they couldn't really, you know, who is that cop from the state that comes down and enforces all those regulations? And they couldn't answer it. Can somebody answer that now? I mean, I don't know if I can ask Ms. Cole, but yeah, come on up. Shoot.
Go ahead, John. I could have answered it, but go ahead.
Oh, okay, well, I'll take the mayor's answer.
Go ahead. John, come on up.
Yeah.
All right, from what I understand, it's regulated by FWC. I don't know the Florida statutes, but there are, I think, 2 statutes that regulate it.
Okay. And so is that Ms. Cole's understanding also? Because I thought she mentioned like 3 statutes. So I may have been misunderstood or misunderstood what the, because I was listening. I think everybody up here was listening, but maybe I.
So the primary regulatory statute is Florida Statute 327.54. That lays out all the requirements that an owner has to follow in order to rent a vessel to an outside operator.
Okay. All right. And so FWC, how many times, Ms. Cole, while you're still up here, I mean,
I'm sure the mayor could answer this too. How many times per month during season does FWC come down and inspect your client's boats?
I don't even have an answer to that.
Okay.
No.
I mean, I don't live down on the harbor like some people. Yeah, but I've never seen one down there, I'm just going to say. So, not many. So,
But the point is that is the regulating authority, and they do have the power to do that.
right. Okay. And so maybe part of our problem is we don't have a good enough relationship with FWC or the Coast Guard to come down and enforce the safety aspect. Because my understanding, and again, I wasn't here when y'all went through all this and promulgated all this, but there were two components. There was the ecological component. You got, too much trash and you got too much going on there, and it's denigrating the harbor quality, the water quality. And the other one was the safety issue. You got a bunch of drunks down there, running around wild and crazy on pontoon boats. And so if we don't have a cop on the beat, it doesn't really matter what's going on until we fix that part of the problem. But I think from a safety perspective, I kind of agree with the mayor on this. I'm done, I think, with questions. Now I get to give my little 2 cents. It's not going to hurt for 6 months. I mean, if we were in the middle of summer, okay, yeah, you might have an argument, but I don't think it would sway me. I'm a little concerned about the wording of a proposed ordinance that says, what are we trying to solve? Are we just trying to limit the number of boats? So that's why we're limiting docks? Well, we can't limit the number of boats because we don't even know how many boats are there. So we don't know if we got more or less or whatever. I want to solve the problem, but I'm not sure how we're going to identify, and I agree with Mr. Destin on this. When we pass something, it ought to solve the problem, and it ought to deal with that problem that we identified, not trying to be a global solution to multiple problems in the same ordinance. And so if you can, now, the one thing I would say that I do agree with you is I would say this has got to be it. I don't know who we talked to at the Corps, and I understand the holidays, and we had COVID and all this other stuff. They need to get off the dime and produce the study, because we keep saying, well, we're waiting for the harbor capacity study. We need to stop waiting. They need to perform. But I would just ask you to rethink your motion, because there's too many unknowns and there's too many variables in right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I got Mr. Smith. Before I turn it over to you, Kevin, I do have a question. With this present motion, if it passes, does that mean there's no longer a moratorium, or would the moratorium be written into the ordinance? Because the ordinance before us, before this new motion, was to renew the moratorium for 6 months. That's what this ordinance says. That's a public hearing on that ordinance, and he kind of intervened with a substitute.
So I would suggest that you could do it in two ways. You could pass this ordinance on first reading and then have us come back with a second ordinance to address the new information so that the moratorium stays in effect. Or we could invoke the pending ordinance doctrine on one ordinance that stops all submerged land kind of construction in the harbor for 6 months, as far as docks excluding single-family residences. I think the better way to do it is to pass this one and direct us to prepare the additional ordinance because of the notice issue. But either way, new ordinances will be advertised for first reading. They always are. We never bring an unnoticed ordinance to the council.
And the moratorium that was previously in place is about to be ended. That's the reason we're having this public hearing.
Right, it expires now, so it's up to the council if you want to prolong it for another 6 months. or not.
I just want to make that clear. I got Mr. Schmidt, then Mr. Braden, Mr. Destin, and Dr. Ramswell to discuss this particular motion, and once we go through that list, we're going to take this motion to a vote. Go ahead, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, sir. Kim, based on that, what you just said, if we went to our ordinance route, new ordinance, you'd have to write it up, send it to LPA, go to 2 readings at LPA, or 1 meeting at LPA? If we wrote a new ordinance based on,
We don't have to go to LPA on this. We would just bring it to council. And, yeah, we could do it pretty quickly per your directive. We have to follow advertising requirements.
of course. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your honesty, your heart as well, and I don't think I've said anything to make it sound like I'm trying to destroy the fishing industry or the heritage of our city. And if that's ever been construed out of what I've said, then that's not the case. I think the points that you made helped enforce what I'm asking, I believe, because if additional industries or businesses or a future development is coming or wants to come, that's only going to potentially harm the fishing industry as well. So, it's going to help the fishing industry to protect them as well. I get that the Marina is in the past, but what I'm also trying to to solve with the global, Mr. Bagby, you mentioned the global ordinance, is I don't know what's going to come in a month or 2 months or 3 months of the plane development. I don't know what it's going to be, but my global idea is to solve those unknowns. That somebody might walk into their office next week to bring in sightseeing boats, not just pontoon boats, sightseeing boats, glass bottom boats, parasail boats, anything that's not in the livery vessel moratorium that is going to impact the harbor. Because again, from what I've heard, it's not the only reason we're doing the harbor capacity study. And again, that was before my time as well. But in the year that I've been here, the harbor capacity study does a lot. But a major factor is what's going on in the waters of the harbor. And I can't solve the exact building or the permit or the dock or the business, but to treat all constituents that put me in this position in a fair way, I need to pause things for all, not just a pontoon boat company. I don't want to. I saw a video recently of a pontoon rental boat acting a fool. I don't disagree that it's crazy, but I think we owe it to everyone to slow things down if we're going to put $250,000 towards a study, because God forbid when the study is over, it's going to be very interesting what comes from this study and then the actions and policies that we have to put forward. And that day's coming soon. And I imagine, like, it's only hypothetical, but depending on what those results are, there's going to have to be some very permanent decisions, like the mayor was saying, that we're going to possibly have to make. And so, the intention is not to shut down the guy from building a big house, or certain things. I want the current development orders to happen, as I think Ms. Kopp and Lewis said, those will happen. But I want to support the staff and the importance of the harbor capacity study and stop things in the harbor until the study's done.
Thank you, sir.
That's what I got.
I'm just going to go Dewey right on down, if that's okay with the council members. Go ahead, Mr. Destin. Or we can go this way. Go ahead, Rodney. I just wrote it down.
I just want to say I agree with a lot that you said, Gary, in your comments. I think the only problem is and not to give up on it, but we have lost 95% of our heritage. And a lot of it, I think, is down there at that circus we have at the harbor. If we want to try to gain back some of our heritage, we need to clean that up as well. But I do agree with majority of what your comments were. That's all I've got on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Dr. Ramsell?
Thanks. So obviously at the core of this is what do we want to do, as Councilman Bagby said. And you know, are we ever even going to know how many vessels of every type we have in the harbor? That's probably close to impossible because they're coming and going at all times. People buy a jet ski, I mean, I don't know how we're ever going to get an exact number. With that being said, the idea of trying to be as fair and equitable across the board, if we don't want to look at stopping everything, what about opening the livery vessel thing back up until we get the study back and then reevaluating everything? I mean, that might be simpler than trying to stop everything. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing that out. That might be a simpler route to go.
Can I just answer one thing for the council and make sure you all understand this? And maybe you already do, but I'm just clarifying for the record. The moratorium does not stop any existing livery vessel operation from operating at all. All it does, and most of you know this, all it does is stop new vessels from being added to the existing companies. They can sell their businesses, they can rent their businesses, they can continue their businesses. Nobody is stopping them. All it says is until we get the harbor study done, we're not adding new. And the reason was specific to the commercial use. It was at the time the moratorium was passed, the council was addressing a commercial use based on safety concerns that were unique to the businesses. And I'm not saying it was all of them, but this was a council determination, and they wanted the harbor study to back up whether it was true or not, that they didn't have licensed captains. They were coming at a frequency and intensity that is greater than that which would occur at a residential docking facility, for example. So there were differences that the council was trying to address at that time. So I don't want anyone to be misled up there. That's what this was about. Now it is within your purview to change and to want to look at other issues, but that's what happened at the time. Nobody was trying to pick on them. They were just found to have unique issues, and we said, let's get a harbor study to figure out what those are, and then bring that information to council, and then council can decide, do we need different regulations or not? That's all it was.
But throughout this, let's say somebody just has a jet ski rental business. They could add to their jet ski fleet, right?
They would still have to come into compliance with codes, and with the parking issues on the harbor, realistically, nope, it's across the board, everybody is going to have a challenge adding to the harbor right now, even if we don't add anything. I mean, Lewis maybe can speak to that more, but you have to come into compliance with parking and bathrooms and other code requirements, so.
Which sounds like an argument for making all of them the same.
That's in your discretion, but I'm just saying everybody has that challenge currently.
That's all I had, was looking at it maybe from the other perspective of letting the moratorium lapse continue until we get the results of the capacity study and then maybe make other or different decisions.
All right, we're going to, Mr. Destin, you got last word. We'll take a vote on this particular motion, and then if anyone wants to entertain an additional one thereafter, we'll do it. Because this motion right now is different than the hearing. Recommended motion. Okay. So, Mr. Destin, you got final word, then we'll take a vote on this motion.
Okay. Part of the biggest problem that we were trying to solve is the accidents and the people operating boats that don't know how to operate boats. We can solve that in a far more onerous manner, one that truly would put these folks out of business, which I have no intention of doing, by simply saying you can't rent to somebody who's not a licensed captain. I don't think they want that. I don't want that for them, because that would put them out of business far more finally than a temporary moratorium. I think under Robert's rules, Mr. Schmidt has made a motion to approve something, and I'm going to make a substitute motion that is the original motion, which is to extend the moratorium for 6 months.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
And I have a second, which brings us now to further discussion. Mr. Bagby, would you like to?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
And I would say to Mr. Schmidt okay.
He said he was listening.
Okay, he's listening. To follow up this motion with a motion to put a moratorium on all permitting in the harbor, if that's what he wants to do, and then we could direct staff to bring back that ordinance, and then we could just bait that, and then we would notice it, and we would have this room full of people who, I wouldn't, because I was going to ask the question, Mr. Mayor, for him to clarify his motion, because I heard two different things. Everything, and then everything except single-family residences on the harbor. So if you're concerned about the development or the crowding on the harbor or whatever the concern is, then let's make it everybody. But I believe right now that we ought to do pass Mr. Destin's motion, and then we can discuss what else this body wants to do. Thank you.
Ms. Aber.
Mr. Bagby covered most of it, but I too wanted to tell you that I appreciated the passion that you brought to the forefront, that this is about a fishing village. This is not about a pontoon village. And I think if we want to put a moratorium on it, and then, like you said, have Kevin make a second motion to moratorium on any further additions to any other livery vessels in the harbor. But I agree, we need to hold this one and then maybe create a second one.
All right, any further discussion? Go ahead, Dr.
I'd like to have the
Ramswell.
motions repeated.
Okay.
Of course, the only one, I guess we're concerned with it first.
That's right,
Mr. Destin's,
the
which is
recommended
one-
motion.
The recommended.
Okay.
And then
And
Mr.
it-
Schmidt's motion,
Off the table. He did a substitute motion under Robert's rules.
yeah, any
Sure.
of us can make another motion following yours.
That's right, after the fact. All right? Let's take this one, Mr. Destin's motion, to a vote.
And I'm just clarifying, the motion as it's presented in our packet is to extend the moratorium, correct?
Yeah, you're approving the ordinance on first reading.
Okay.
Ayes have it, so moved.
So it seems redundant to make the one that I was going to make, because, or not even redundant, but
Well,
moved.
that's our last public hearing, right?
That is.
Okay, so if you have a motion you want to make now, because we're into, where are we at on the agenda? We're on, right, well, we can do this before we go to consent agenda, seeing how, I mean, if you want to make a
Well,
motion.
it's still on this topic, so, I mean, I don't know if, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't, it seems now, based on that vote, that maybe I'm in left field, but I was going to make the suggestion that we actually go ahead and lift the moratorium and then reevaluate when we get the capacity study back. But
We just
it's-
voted to pass.
I know, that's what I'm saying,
Okay.
is, I mean, it's smooth at
All right.
this point. But,
At least for 6 months.
yeah.
Okay. Seeing then, I got to take a break. So before we get to, unless you want to go to consent agenda, because that's really fast. Let's do consent agenda really fast.
I make a motion, we approve consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second? Take it to a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Webb's good to go for another hour. He's got a full plate. Hopefully, we won't be that long, but you never know. There you go. Thank you, sir. I'll set my clock. All right. Let's go. We got that done. So we're on item 7, and we will start with you, Mr. Braden. And remember, you're the one that put me on a time clock.
Hey, hi. Right. First thing is the whole compass system. I'm just going to say I'm unhappy with it. I'm getting way too many complaints. And what I would like is if I could get, or if the council could get maybe a list of complaints or issues or things that ain't working for them or that they need to improve or whatever, and get that from each, and I'd like that from each I just lost it. Yeah, department head. Thank you. And I like their version of it. I don't want their version to be modified or whatever. I want the department heads to get their staff, whoever, see what they've seen in the system, what can improve by the system, what they need for themselves or whatever in the system. And I'd like this council to have that, because I would like to see how the system's working, what the problems are, what problems are being fixed, the timely manner that the problems are being fixed.
Rodney, have you're in that business, and so you're always pulling permits and stuff. Have you used it yourself personally?
No, and I told him I was going to, but I've been involved with several people that do, and nothing has changed over the time since it's been, and it just seems like that simple things that should have been worked out before the system ever went live is still an issue today. Or there's new issues that come up, and I'm like, well, surely that they should have run some scenarios, and we were going to get with contractors and let them start working the system and pulling permits on it and working the bugs out and all that. And it's just, we heard it tonight, that it's, and I hear it on a daily basis, that it's just not working. It's just not, things aren't changing. It's just like it was thrown out there, and I could be wrong. There may be a lot of things that's been worked on or changed since it's went live, and I would like to know that as well. Look, here's the issues we had. Here's what's been done. This is the issue we had. It's been fixed. Here's how. But I would like to have something from every department head with all their staff members. And, and I don't need 100 different items from each department head. Just the main things I would like to see, because I was big in pushing this system and getting it going, and I knew it was going to take time, and it's been live now for several months, and it just seems like we got just as many issues today as we did then. And so is that something that's realistic? Something that, am I asking for too much, or?
Webb, you want to answer that first, or?
Okay. Speaking on my end, I think our turnaround times have been cut in half. So that is an incredible improvement already. And this is before we even did any system, any process changes. It's just from moving to an automated environment. Now, the greatest the complaint that I've heard is people failing to register, because you got to register to use the system. And so that process isn't as clear to them as it should, and it's mostly time. People are getting used to a new system. It's just been a few months, but in our business, things take a little while for people to get used to how to load their documents and so on. So from the operational side, I'm pretty happy at where we are. In fact, this is before we even do any tweaks to our processes. So I expect to cut our turnaround time by even additional quarter. So the customer side of things, we just got to help them get onto registration and knowing how to load up things and so forth. And so that's the main complaint that I've had on my end.
And I'll add too that a lot of time has gone into this, there's no doubt about it. And we have a lot of processes within the city. And I think we've identified some processes through regulation or fee schedules or things like that that we can improve upon too to help streamline this. And that is actually part, if you look at part of the management plan, that's one of the items. There's certainly some room for improvement, but there has been a lot of effort put into it. I think we can, as we move forward, we're going to continue to find those process improvements that we need to work on. But we're happy to do that and provide that information to council.
I appreciate it, and I know there's been a lot of time and manpower, I mean, probably hundreds, thousands of hours, and I know there's been a lot of time put into it. I'd just like to know what problems have been addressed, what problems have staff addressed, because I know there is still problems today that some of the staff it's just created more work for them. So, I mean, I don't know, it'd be nice to know what, here's a list of stuff that was a problem that we've identified and we fixed it, and now it's easier or whatever, because I'm just getting, I don't want to say too much, but it just seems like there's still a lot of issues with it. And I understand what Lewis is saying, that, a lot of the contractors, they just not computer savvy, and it's their end of it that they're having trouble with. But anyway, I just, I've kept my mouth shut and just kind of let the bugs work itself out, but it just seemed like nothing's changed over a long period of time. So.
Do you think it would serve us if we took an outside looking in type approach, get somebody or a couple contractors, probably be best that haven't signed on to the Compass, and let them go through the process and evaluate it from the user end?
Right.
I lost my phone, and I went from a Droid to an Apple iPhone. And God, it's been disastrous for me, because I'm a techno Neanderthal. So, and I think maybe Lewis is maybe hitting on something, but maybe we get a team, maybe you can put together a group of guys to look at it from the outside looking in, to where they can say, look, man, this is not user friendly. This, and this needs to be addressed, because those guys are looking at the other end.
Right, I agree.
So maybe that might be the way to do it. What's that sound like to y'all? To have an outside looking in evaluation of Compass.
I like that idea, and we can work with Lewis's group as well as IT and do that. I know that IT has been working hard on that and improving a lot on a daily basis with community development. So we're happy to do that. We're always looking ways to improve. I think this technology is good. I think some of the processes may be behind the system we can continue to improve, but we need to do that through what you're talking about by getting some feedback so that we can make sure that that's taken care of.
I wonder if we could get one of our citizen panels, advisory panels, just have their members do it and come back and give us a report.
I'd like to, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to offer to work with Rodney on this to get this off the ground, because I have some other ideas along the same lines.
Yeah, that'd be great. And by no means am I criticizing the staff whatsoever at all. I mean, it's a huge undertaking, and they've done a tremendous job. It's just, I just keep hearing the same issues over and over and over, on a daily basis, and I'd like to try to be a process of fixing it, solving that problem and not, getting it going. So yeah, I think it's a great idea.
You're the new Compass designee, along with our city manager. Don't volunteer.
The next thing is I guess for Joey, what's going on with our harbor compliance officer, or I'm not sure what we're calling that guy now.
Yeah, he's the harbor compliance officer. He's actually signed that's his jurisdiction. He's been in training, and now this week he just left to become code certified 1. So he'll be back on Monday. Actually on Saturday is his Monday.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Dr. Ramswell.
Thank you. Couple things tonight. I wanted to see if we had in place any sort of standard operating procedure, protocols for when someone comes in and says they have a VIP, and what is our security protocol?
When they come into City Hall or
Sure, like, for example, before our last meeting, apparently a group came in and said that they needed to perform a security sweep. What protocols do we have in place? What is our procedure when something like that happens?
Right now, the procedure at both facilities would be that a staff member either escort any non-staff member or that they have them under surveillance at all times. And the persons, they're supposed to sign in. I don't know how often it is not happening, but they're supposed to sign in also.
Are they required to furnish paperwork of any kind? Are they required to have a sheriff's officer with them to verify the security operation? Or can just anyone come in and say they're a security team?
So at first we were talking about a VIP, so I was just, in general, if they're not a staff person, that's the answer. I'm more familiar with the City Hall operation, obviously, because that's where I'm based out of. So if somebody came up to the front desk and asked to come back to the office space, they would have to notify the appropriate department, and someone from that department would come up and get them. But in the common area up front, they are okay to be in there until someone comes to escort them. Yeah. So, and we do have a policy on this, so I can send the policy out to the entire council so that I don't misquote it, because I don't have it right in front of me, but we do have an actual policy on it.
Terrific. Yeah, if you could send that to council so we can see that, because I'd like to review that. My next thing is I had someone approach me who had come in and inquired about obtaining a permit or a business license to do pop-up picnics on the beach. And they were told that we do not issue permits or licenses for any such ventures like that on the beach. And so I wanted to find out why that would be any different from the sandcastle people or the people throwing weddings or, anything that we actually do permit and allow on the beach.
That's a very good question. As far as commercial activities on city-owned property, I can tell you that we would not allow that because we reserve that space for our residents and visitors to use as a beach area. Unless it's in the evening hours when there's an exception in one of our resolutions that allows for one wedding a day at certain parks on the water. But that is about it as far as what is allowed on the city property. What's allowed on the private property is a different matter.
So she should have been able to get some sort of permit or business license or something in the event she's operating on private property or elsewhere?
She actually spoke with me, ma'am, and she wanted to do it at our park down off of Calhoun, and she can't do it on any of our city properties. She can't do it at the parks. She wanted to operate a business from our city parks.
But it would be allowable not in a city park, right? Is that what
Then
I'm
she'd have
understanding?
to speak with the planners and make sure that the zoning is correct and so on and so forth. She'd have to get permission from the upland property owners as well.
Okay.
Can I ask you, or add just to make sure we're not missing anything, but if I reserve Leonard Destin's park, I could hire a pop-up picnic company to come in there and set up that picnic because I reserved it through the city, right?
That would fall under the Parks and Rec, but it can't be, they can't come there and advertise to do business. That's what
Like,
they're,
as a citizen, I can reserve a pavilion at Leonard Destin, I believe,
without
right?
looking at the ordinance, I
think we can-
couldn't tell you.
Yeah, so she's offering services. So if I'm out laying on the beach or something, or my husband's got a spot on the beach and he wants to have a romantic anniversary on the beach and throw me a picnic, I don't know, whatever, isn't that something that would be allowed?
She would have to get permission from the property owners again, and to be able to access so on and so forth. Just like the ice cream guys and things like that, they'd have to talk to the planning and review to make sure it's within the zoning districts. And also, it was presented that not at no beach, it was at our city parks.
Okay, perfect. Oh, I just wanted to clarify so that I could get back with additional information, because she may not have known what questions to ask, so.
Right, and she asked if she could advertise for that too, and I told her no.
Okay, all right, perfect. Thank you, I think that's all.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Destin?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Bagby?
Nothing for me. I'll wait for H1 and J1.
All right, cool. All right, Ms. Abear?
Nothing for me, Mayor. I brought my questions to the city manager and the city attorney and the land use attorney during our agenda meetings. Thank you.
They are always available. Mr. King?
Nothing tonight, sir, thank you.
And Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to have one thing to add here, and I'll preface it with, I'm doing this for the sake of bringing equal and fairness across the board, while also giving a strong weight to the importance of our harbor capacity study that we're spending a lot of money on, because I do think it's very important. So with that stated, I wanted to bring forward a motion to direct city manager to get staff to bring forward an ordinance that would place a moratorium on adding new developments and modifying usages to any harbor property that directly impacts activity inside the harbor waterways, with exception to single-family residences.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion, I have a second.
How long is that going to be for? 6 months?
Sorry. I would like to say that coincides with the livery vessel moratorium. Currently, yes, sir.
Nobody's raising their hand? Oh, there we go. Mr. Bagby?
Yeah, I just want to ask the question, why you're excluding single-family residences? If it's an issue, it's an issue in my mind. I mean, so, and it's not going to affect any single-family residence that's already permitted or already in the pipeline or whatever. So I'm just curious.
Do we have any on the harbor? Any single-family residences? Yeah?
Well, I'm going to make a comment. I think that it's honorable on principle. I don't think it's necessary for us to do this. We have a harbor capacity study that's going to paint the picture for our future development on Destin Harbor that we'll have inside of that 6 months. I don't know how convoluted an ordinance like that would look like, and how detailed, and how many, like I think Mr. Destin brought up, that we public notice this one, we're probably going to have a full room because well, this is true. This is true, Mr. Braden, but sometimes legislative ideas bring unintended consequences, and I think this one has got potential to have many. So I don't think we should do this, but I'm not voting, so, and I think I'm probably the last one to say anything about it, so we'll just take it to a vote if you all ready.
No, sir, I didn't.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, what your question was, what's the reason of saying single-family residences? Exempting single-family residences? No specific reason other than the fact that if somebody wants to have a house, they want to build a house next week and they want to put a boat behind it, I feel like that's not going to be a major problem to our harbor. But if somebody wants to develop something that's going to be larger than that, there's potential issues for it. That's, I guess, my only reason.
I think what your reasoning centers around is that our priorities as a city are Destin residents, Destin local businesses, or Destin, golly, I look like an idiot. Destin residents, Destin. Anyways, and so I think it centers around our number one priority as a council is Destin locals, Destin local residents. If you want to move to Destin, you want to live on the water on Destin Harbor, you should have every right to build a dock to store your boat at.
That's the businessman.
Yeah, but if everybody that had a single-family residence on the harbor was a resident, I would agree 100% with that, but they're not. They're not. And so, this is, because I want to support you so bad, but it's like, I can't get my arms around, just.
I'll modify the motion to remove that item. I'll modify the motion to remove that item. There you go.
Okay, we have an amendment to the motion. Does the second approve it? All right. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All right, let's go.
Let's see how.
Ayes have it, so moved. Here you go, Kim. All right. What else, Kev? Is that all you had?
Yeah, yes, sir. That's all I had.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, city council meeting procedures. I gave a little handout. It says asking council to consider ways to make the agenda more efficient. Here's an example to start. It doesn't look like at first glance that there's many changes. There's a couple subtle changes that I thought we ought to consider because I'm about efficiency. We're actually done really for some of the items we've had to discuss tonight. We've actually done really good going through the meeting tonight. The only real change, there's three main changes. One is, when I first became mayor, it was in the previous ordinance that we would have our public commenters, if they were going to talk on an agenda item or a non-agenda item, fill out a yellow card at the beginning of the meeting. And that way we could get a general idea, me as the principal officer to run the meeting, give us an idea of what to expect on timelines. I just want us to, I don't know how we got away from it. Maybe because COVID probably had a lot to do with that. Yeah. So I just wonder if maybe we ought to not go back to that. And then moving the consent agenda up right after public comment, get that out of the way in case any of our staff members, they don't have to hang out. They can go home, the ones that aren't needed for some of the later issues. And then when we do our hearings, we'll fill out the blue cards for public hearings. So our attorney and myself, we know who's going to step up. And then the only change is when we have our final public comment period is we won't require a card to be filled out because they're already here, and if they've stayed, I can recognize them like we've always had. So that is a little change. And just like tonight where we made a motion and just voted late, it wasn't announced, there's no public notice to those type of activities, and we've really, since I've been mayor, have tried to get away from legislating under item 7, but to allow that to take place, I would like to introduce new business as a section to where any recognized council member can set an actionable item for on the next agenda under this, or if they can get the extraordinary vote by the council, in other words, they want to address an issue and have a vote on it, if the council agrees to do that with a supermajority vote, then we could take that action. I didn't bring that up tonight because we haven't been doing that, and it would be unfair to Mr. Schmidt. But that's one thing that I would like to consider. And then we let our land use and our city attorney give us any updates or actionable items. And then what is item 7 now would be just what the Board of County Commissioners does is called the council or mayor's minute. which is literally just a few minutes each to share thoughts or comments or ideas that's not actionable and/or on the agenda. And then would have the final public comment and card. So this is just my ideas, I think might make us a little bit more efficient, but maybe y'all have much better ideas. I just wanted to kind of spark the conversation, and then what we could do is have that conversation, and if we want to make any changes, direct staff to come up with a change to the, because we have an ordinance now that rules our procedure, so we'd have to amend or change the existing ordinance. So first up is Mr. Schmidt. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions and comments. One, can past minute approvals be thrown into a consent agenda? Yes?
Yeah, I mean, legally it can.
So potentially, I would encourage that as a possible option.
I think that'd be a great
Instead
idea.
of like tonight, we had 2 separate votes on agenda or items. I like the card thing. I know what you're talking about, but I want to make sure we're not making it a requirement to get up, because I know at county commission and other places, you just have to turn in the card at some point. Because I've seen people hold a card, but I don't want to make it a requirement where, because they didn't turn one into you before the meeting, now they can't speak during the public speaking
I
part.
think how we handled it before is at the very beginning of the meeting, once we called the meeting to order, I would do a little PSA
Sure.
saying, we're going to have public comment, and if you would like to speak,
I hear you.
go up to Ray and give them the opportunity to fill out a card.
I just don't want to say,
No,
you come in 5 minutes late, you didn't turn your card during the PSA.
No, that's not the intent
Okay.
at
Okay,
all.
good.
So we could be flexible. I just
Sure.
thought that's one thing that was in the ordinance that we used to do, and we haven't.
Okay.
But there's an efficiency there, and I thought maybe we ought to probably get
And the last
COVID, I think, because we quit having in-person meetings.
I think so. And the last item I would throw out there is, I don't, and if this is what you're recommending, I know these are just suggestions, so I'm just giving feedback. Sure. I think what I heard you say is if I wanted to bring up an item tonight, I have to ask to put it on the agenda and get a supermajority vote to do that tonight. And I don't agree with that. I don't want to see that happen.
It's
pass it.
It's in the ordinance now, we haven't been doing it.
To pass it.
No.
Put it on the agenda. You have to have a supermajority vote.
To add it to the agenda. Hey, I'm all about enforcing the rules. I mean, you know.
No, it's just.
But thank you.
No.
So I've just had feedback from other municipalities about, I guess there are ours that ours is written that way, but we've never, now I won't say never have enforced it, but for as long as I can remember, people added stuff night of without asking for a vote. So if we started going down that road, I mean, I've heard nothing but negative, you know, feedback on doing that. So I mean, I hope we don't enforce it. I hope we continue to allowing the flexibility that we continue having, because I think that
I think it does preserve the flexibility. It just
does.
follows Robert's Rules of Order, and it also provides a level of transparency for the council, because if to bring up an item that hasn't been previously publicly posted on the agenda that came out on Thursday, the only way that we're going to legislate under new business is if it's a super majority, and that gives the council coverage for actually doing it.
I hear you. And so then the only thing I would add then is I personally feel a new business section, and then the other section that you have could potentially turn into, you know, because then sometimes once, you know, Mr. Bagby starts throwing in some ideas under his city council mayor minute, that might lead into legislation and idea, then we're still doing votes on that section. So I personally like to see just one council comments legislation section.
Thank you, sir. That's what the whole purpose of this is just, it's not about voting for anything right now, it's just to have that conversation. Next is Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've done anything wrong or different tonight with the motions that's been made, because the motion that was made was to direct staff to bring us back an ordinance that had first reading, second reading, we haven't passed anything. We just directed staff to bring us back an ordinance that the public can speak on, and we've done that in the past. Because I can put anything under my name, with the harbor, you know, or moratorium or whatever under my name, and then we can vote on it that night. I don't like, and I really won't vote on something that the public should have input on. I mean, if we want to walk something on the agenda, tonight's agenda, and get a supermajority, it's going to be something like that we stop charging residents for boat launch at Joe's Bayou. I mean, why would any resident want to come up and dispute that? You know, something simple like that we've done in the past. It was, you know, or just kind of a housekeeping item that needed to be put on tonight's agenda, but something that, you know, the public should be able to say, have something, an input. It's just like staff dropping a stack of documents on the dais 5 minutes before the meeting starts. You know, we shouldn't accept any of that. That's how we've got in trouble in years past. You know, here's this document, nothing's really changed in it, just go ahead and pass it. So I don't want that either. So, but I like the rest of your ideas, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramswell.
Thanks. So I noticed that you don't have proclamations on here. Was that by design or just an omission?
Mission.
And then one thing I had brought up several years ago was the possibility of, if it reaches a certain time, not any items that we had not yet gotten to move to the next agenda. And there were some people very much in favor and some people very much opposed. So, yeah, I think that's what it was. It was like at 9 o'clock, no more.
There is
new
wisdom
business.
in that.
So I'm just mentioning that because, like I said, it was a split reception last
I think it has to
time,
do with the
but I'll bring it
timeline
up.
of your butt. You've been sitting about 9 o'clock, you're done. Your mind's done, your body's done, and the public's usually done.
I mean, we've been much better, but over the years, I mean, we've had several meetings that have gone on almost to midnight.
Well, that's why, I'm just looking at efficiencies here. I think if we do that, this council's been very good students of their briefing documents. They've had meetings and got their questions answered. If you really think about it, the last couple of months, we've gone through some we've done a lot better. And sometimes there's just so much on there that it's going to take some time because it's just the load is so great, especially when it comes to the briefing documents. But I think that's why I'm just looking for little subtle improvements to efficiency to when we do have those really heavy loads that we can get through them in a fairly timely manner. So.
And I do like Mr. Schmidt's suggestion of putting the minutes under the consent.
Yeah, I thought that was a no-brainer. I think that's probably, we need to do that whether we do any other change whatsoever. That would take up, but presentations, that was an omission. But presentations was a mistake.
Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, it's presentations, proclamations.
Proclamations, recognitions, and special presentations and announcements.
Yeah,
It's in all for.
Yeah, that should go right under the agenda approval before we do minutes and the consent agenda. You agree with that? Right where it's at now, it's item.
Yeah, and that way the people that are here for something, they're out quicker.
Okay. And then next up is Jim, and then Mr. Destin, and then Ms. Abear.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I agree with everything y'all have said so far. For the most part, I'm not a big fan of the cards. I'll just be honest with you. You know, I think we did one change or one amendment in the 8 years I was on, and that resulted in 13, 15. And by my count, I think you've done 6 since 16 to our procedures. And this will be number 7, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But the cards, I will couch this in this. I think we ought to encourage citizen participation and limit our proliferation of undisciplined conversations. I think the council ought to be listening and providing guidance. No, I know. Sometimes, well, that's what we were told. You know, the cards, I would go back to the original 1315 rules where people could come up and speak on the issue. Having sat out there for a couple of months and watched the council operate and watch and go, you know, okay, I got to get up, I get 3 minutes and to talk about 4 different issues. You know, I just want to talk about 2 of them, maybe not 4 of them. So I got my 3 minutes, I got a minute and a half to talk about item number 4B and item number 5A or whatever, and then I'm done. And if I want to say more, then I have to sit through the entire length of this meeting so I can give you, as a citizen, my feedback or my input or my question, ask my questions. And so,
Well, Jim,
yeah.
to that point, I looked at the BOCC agenda, and what they do is 90% of their stuff's consent. And then each of these issues, like you're talking about, 4A, 4B, you know, like basically the city manager's report.
Right.
Each one has a ability for public comment.
Exactly.
And I mean, that maybe, you know, I don't know, y'all think about that. Maybe that may make it more efficient, or it might make it less. I don't know, but I'm open to anything.
We don't have a lot of people come and we say, well, it must be because we're doing such a great job. It also might be because they think we don't listen to them.
Right.
Okay, if they do come, they get their 3 minutes up front, they can stay for 3 hours, and then they get 3 minutes at the end, and it's not going to make a difference. And so I just want more citizen participation, and the cards don't promote that, I would say. The new business, I don't have a problem with that. I think we should follow our rules on the agenda. On your city council mayor minute, I agree. I think I said this before. These used to be where, you know, somebody would say, oh, we want to congratulate Miss Destin because she won Miss Okaloosa County. Or, hey, I went to the TDC meeting, or I went to the TMP, you know, the MPO meeting. And here's what the county decided, or here's what that body decided, because I'm your rep and I'm supposed to let you make sure you know what's going on. I agree, it shouldn't be asking the staff questions that we can ask, as Ms. Abear said in her pre-meeting or my pre-meeting, or asking for clarification on something. You know, that's what we get an hour or however long we get to talk to the staff before that. So yes, that could be cut down significantly, I think. And then the public comment again, yeah, at the end. If somebody wants to sit here for 4 hours and Shane wants to get up and talk, let him. But I want us to approach this from a mindset of creating more opportunity for citizen participation. And that's why I'm kind of opposed to the cards and opposed to you can only talk before we actually discuss all the things that you care about.
That would just take, that particular idea would just take a little bit, in ordinance form, we'd have to restructure our meetings to be more like the BOCC. And I'm not against that. That's what this whole idea is, to try to come up with some ideas. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me make sure I understand. Approval of minutes, we can put that on the consent. Proclamation, recognition, special presentations, we can't put that on consent, otherwise Mr. Fox will not be able to talk to us, so we're not talking about that, right?
We would do it right where it's at. Right
Okay.
now. We would move tonight's item 1.
Microphone, please.
Like tonight, the item 1A and B would move to consent, and number 2, proclamations, recognition, special presentations would now be number 1, right after our agenda approval.
The public comments and agenda items, I was terribly confused by that when I got back on council, because it's confusing the way it sounds. Public comments on agenda items that are not public hearings, and any other item not on the agenda. That's kind of confusing on its face. So if
That's why I keep saying it every meeting. I try to clear that up.
Yeah.
But I agree with you.
On the new business taking the place, I suppose, new business and the minute taking the place of the council, comments from council and mayor, we're adding 2 agenda items to replace one. I'm not sure that's efficient. So I'm not so sure I would be in favor of that. Other than that, I agree with Jim about the cards. That's just necessary.
Well, we've just been doing fine without it.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to, I think in retrospect, and maybe you guys can answer this because you were probably privy to the card in the ordinance 13, 15.
Wasn't there then? No, it wasn't.
Do you think it had anything to do with having those on that was just public record?
I think it probably had to do with issues like people not knowing when to speak during public hearings versus items that are not on the agenda, they're not public hearings.
Yeah, so if they had a yellow card, they knew they were going to speak under item 3.
That's why it was color-coded, but I don't know if it's worked out.
Is that why it was, Webb? I saw you nod your head over there.
Ray might know since
So,
he's the
so if the
keeper
mayor
of it.
does his job, we don't need cards.
Correct.
All right, got it.
Do you remember?
I got that one.
Mayor Ray might know since he's the clerk.
Ray?
He might remember the genesis.
Go ahead.
I think the yellow card is just to keep track of who's talking, actually, the addresses, and sometimes you don't get it. And also the yellow card is for items that are not on the agenda that normally, if it's not answered here, we provide that to the city manager for future action. That's for the yellow card.
Yeah, so the city manager could follow up on whatever their comments were?
Staff follow up with items that are not on the agenda.
Yeah, well, see, there's an efficiency that we didn't think about.
The comment, and I just want everybody to bear in mind, these rules are done by resolution, is that correct?
These are resolution, yeah.
They're not ordinances.
They're not ordinances, so.
And the point I would make is, we all have to work to keep the time efficient because 4 votes can set aside the resolution, set aside the rules, proceed like they want. We do not do that because we try not to break the rules, but what we do is kind of like an honor system. Because you can set aside Robert's rule with 4 votes, actually. You can set aside the resolution with 4 votes.
Yeah, and Robert's rules is a suggestion and a guide, not really.
Actually, it is a rule.
Oh, yeah, it's written out in it.
Microphone, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad to see that we can do some more efficiency management here, and I agree with what everyone's already told you, and you've made most of the notes already on there. And yeah, I'm glad to see that we just put the minutes right into the consent agenda, not waste time approving 3 sets of those. And then I think all of us meet with the city attorneys, city manager, we all get our briefing beforehand, and I think that's helped us weed out a lot of long conversations under our names during the end of the meeting, and I think that needs to be the continuation so that we literally a couple minutes and we're done. Thank you.
Any other comments? Well, it seems like we got a consensus on combining the past minute approvals and the consent agenda, and doing that right after public comment. And then the cards go out. But what about the new business? I know it's like 7A and 7B. It is adding something to it, but it may not. Or should we just keep pressing on like we have, but if somebody wants to do an actionable item, we do it the right way and with a supermajority vote, just leave it the way it is? But do it the way we're supposed to do it by putting an unadvertised item that's going to be legislated on has to be approved by a supermajority vote, and then we could do it. Is that good?
Yeah, you don't need to go down the line twice.
Okay, all right.
So just go down once and.
So by resolution then, those will be the only changes. Can you put together something along those lines, just for everybody to take a look at, and then we can address it at our next council meeting? Does that sound good with everyone?
Mayor?
We'll have it written out so we can see it. Go ahead, Ray.
I have a question also. We have a resolution that you adopted 2013, and there's been 6 or 7 amendments to that. Can we combine them all into one resolution?
I think that would be
With the
most
changes that you wish
efficient
to
way to
make?
do it.
Okay.
Yes. So can you guys put that together? And we'll, it's just minor tweaks, but it'll help us out just a little bit. And I appreciate everybody's comments. I started, just started coming up with some ideas. A couple of them were adopted, a couple of them weren't, but I hope that it works out good, and we can always readdress this at a later time. All right, and so lastly, because we are in our old system, we will look to our land use attorney, who's blessed us with a presence once again. Good to see you, Kim.
Thanks, and I don't have anything, thank you.
Kyle?
One thing, I'm going to talk about Lance now. So at a prior meeting, council wanted to essentially change their city manager review process. It seemed like there were 2 primary issues. One related to the complexity of the actual evaluation form itself. So Webb and Nicole worked together, and they came up with a much simplified form. It's pretty much 1 page. It's got a little bit on the back, but not too much. So that is what we're proposing. We substitute in as a new evaluation form, but again, we'd like your input before we finalize that in resolution form. The other issue related to a potential sunshine law issue, providing all scores, council members providing all scores to the mayor, which has potential sunshine law implications since our mayor does have voting power in the city. So what I would propose, and council can discuss this on the dais because it's got its own issues and challenges, is instead of providing those scores to the mayor, who's going to summarize them and come up with a recommendation, I would propose you provide those scores to the HR manager, and she simply tabulate the scores. Don't provide a recommendation because she is, in fact, the city manager employee, and I think that's probably not something y'all want to infect the process. And then those tabulated scores, together with your score sheets themselves, can be brought at a sunshine law meeting, a public meeting, y'all discuss and come up with whatever action you deem appropriate at that time.
That city manager evaluation being summarized by me is part of our charter, or that's an ordinance?
It's just a resolution that council adopted.
Okay, so we can change it easy peasy. Good.
So what I'm proposing is bringing back those changes that I described to y'all at the next council meeting in a resolution, kind of like with these city council procedures. If you're good with it, or if you want any changes to the resolution, I'd rather bring something back that y'all hopefully can approve, so we don't have to keep going through the process. So discuss, please, and let us know what your thoughts are.
I like your ideas. I got a couple folks who want to talk. Mr. Schmidt, go ahead.
This form is just a starting point, right? So the strategic plan instructions section would be extended based upon what's on our strategic plan?
I think that is our current strategic plan. That would include just
Critical and important.
Critical and important.
Sure.
We left off the desirable because desirable by its very term is something that if Lance isn't so busy with these very critical and important priorities, then he would get to the desirable priorities, but it's not something that you're saying do it this year.
Yeah, he might be desired to take a nap.
Sure. So, but the idea of that section is to mirror our 2 critical priorities and important priorities, whatever the current strategic plan is during the evaluation period.
Yep, that's right. It would be updated each year with the strategic plan.
Thank you. Thank you for updating the form.
Mr. Bagby.
Thanks, Mayor. And I understand your position, Kyle, and we've talked about this extensively, but I would still have the mayor. I'm still more comfortable with the mayor because not only the tabulating, all that does is say, here, and now we're arguing in open forum, well, should it be 1.3% increase, 1.4% increase? Well, I like 1.8%, because then you have to have HR come to us and say, here's what similarly situated city managers who are responsible for a similar amount of people in a similar type environment who don't oversee a police force or a fire department or a water department or whatever. This is what they're making on average in coastal towns in Florida. And it's easier if an executive does that. If one person says, okay, so cost of living, last year was 2.3%, but we're not paying him enough because we're not competitive with Fort Walton Beach or wherever, and I don't want the HR manager doing that, obviously, and so you pick that up from the conversation, probably with multiple people. But I also don't want her just throwing it in our lap in a city council meeting at the end of the year and us going through a process that, it's like what, I don't know if you ever made sausage, I have. It's not pretty, okay? The end product's okay, but it's not pretty. And I don't want to bring that sausage making. The thing that would save the mayor is he could recuse himself. If he brought this to us and said, hey, this is my recommendation, and we could rip it apart or whatever, and if we couldn't get a majority vote or it were a tie vote, he could say, I recuse myself from this vote because I'm the one that brought you the proposal. So I don't like putting it in HR's lap. I think you got us halfway there, but I just think the city manager is the face of the staff. He is the leader of the team. He's got to train this team, and he's got to feed us the information that the team provides him. Kind of that conduit. And I think the mayor is and we struggled with this before. I just think the mayor's the best person on this team to do that, to sit him down and say, look, here's what all the evaluations are, and bring us a recommendation, particularly on the compensation. Thanks.
Mr. Destin and Dr. Ramswell.
Thank you. I think probably the point of confusion here is that we're confusing the city manager with a regular city employee. He's not. City manager serves at the pleasure of the council. City employees have a whole list of rights that are protected by labor law that he doesn't have. I've been here through 6 or 7. I've lost count of how many city managers.
A couple of them twice.
Yeah, and I always go to the city manager in private. If I'm having an issue with the job they're doing, and tell them. And give them an opportunity to address it rather than putting it in a public document, the shortcomings that I might feel are available. The public can't look at the employee jacket for our employees where they're criticized or whether their transgressions are put on notice. I don't think that they need to look at the decisions we have with the city manager who serves at our pleasure. So I always have a private conversation with the city manager. Any one of the 7 council members up here can make a motion to give them a raise, to increase their pay. And if everybody thinks that that's correct, that passes. Mr. Bagby talks about making the sausage and it's not pretty. That's true. I'd rather make the sausage in public than in private. And I think we had this debate the last time when they put the mayor in charge of tabulating and coming up with a recommendation. It was clearly, in my mind, a violation of the Sunshine Law then. It would be now, because otherwise it's all right for Ms. Hebert and any other council members for us to talk on email. And then as long as we make it public, or the public record, then we didn't violate the public records law. I don't think that's a calculation anybody would come up with. So I'm happy with the solution that the city attorney has come up with, because I think it's a good compromise. It turns it over to HR who can compile it, but I'm going to tell you up front, my conversations with the city manager on his or her job performance will be held in private. And unless that's not resolved, then I'll bring it back to the council and we'll take action.
Let me just expound on Dewey's point, because I think that is important. The resolution as currently written does contemplate that each council member and the mayor has sit-down meetings with the city manager. I think it is expected at that time that criticisms of that nature, to avoid the sausage such as that being made in the public as much as possible, will be done at that time. There is in the form, though, there is a section, I think, that you can list some weaknesses if you feel that is necessary on the form, the evaluation form. So I just want to point that out.
All right, Dr. Ramswell.
So, listening to the different propositions and methods that have been posed, how do we come together and decide upon an amount to award?
So, I mean, the proposal, as I have laid it out, is not, I mean, it's going to be up, kind of like Mr. Destin said, to the city council to come up with a number. I think what would be appropriate, as Jim said, is for the HR director to bring to you comparables from comparable communities. But, you know, I would hesitate, if I were in y'all's position, to put too much discretion and too much duty on the HR manager, again, as she is an employee of the city manager. So it's a delicate balancing act. And
Back to my point.
Well, Dr. Renzo, another thing that you're bringing up here is we have to do an annual and then a biannual report, basically, on the city manager's job performance. It doesn't necessitate, none of those necessitate a change in his salary. That's something that can be evaluated or added to the council's actions after that report has been filed, but it's supposed to be just an overall rating on his performance, is what I understood. Now, whether you give him a raise or dock his pay or whatever, that's at the privilege of the council. Am I not correct in that?
it is a privilege of the council, but, you know, I think as the experienced legislators up here would say, usually when you do an evaluation, typically that it comes with some sort of merit-based raise.
Sure. All right.
Maybe we look at then just randomly after we've all completed it, bringing it up in a meeting and somebody makes a motion of, I support 2% or whatever it may be. I mean.
Well, that's what I'm proposing essentially.
So a blind, essentially, we're blind to what the other people think, but somebody will make a motion.
Exactly, and that way, you know, I think that ensures compliance with the sunshine. I certainly understand Jim's point, and I have my heartburn with this process, but it's that delicate balancing act I think you've got as a public agency. So, you know, I understand Jim's point, and I certainly, if the council wanted to go that direction, we could try to make it work, but I as your attorney, I would just prefer that you take the cautious route.
Okay, I got two folks up still, Mr. Braden and Mr. Bagby. And I think after that, we'll probably just go ahead and give direction. Mr. Bagby? Thank you.
Yeah, I thought Mr. Braden was going to go. Are you going to go? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you weren't first.
You weren't first. I misspoke because I can't, for the life of me, figure out this stupid button.
It says first and next, and he flip-flops who the names are. He doesn't realize.
So you are the, Rodney, you are the victim of a flip-flop. But go ahead, because, go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Come on, we got public comment and go home.
All right.
Go ahead.
I mean, my thought on it is, I mean, I like to be able to, because I think if we come back and do that, what we're talking about, you know, I make a motion to give the city manager a 2% increase. Well, then we're going to have to hear from everybody, and it's going to be a 2-hour discussion, I believe, because everybody's going to have their opinion. So if we have something that we fill out on him, and the HR person takes them all, and and we've done this in the past, you know, item 1, it averages out, you know, on a scale from 1 to 10, it averages out to a 5. Item 2 averages out to a 3. Item 2, you know, and at the bottom it averages out to whatever, to a 3 or to a 10. Then we kind of know what everybody, their feelings is, and then somebody can make a motion off that, like we have in the past. You know, well, he scored an average of 3 out of 10, which is not good, so let's do a 1. Or he scored an 8 out of a possible 10, you know, so obviously the majority of the council loves what city manager's doing, so give him a 3% or whatever. Because I just think if not, we're going to get in a 2-hour discussion of, you know, well, this is what I've done, and we've had it in the past. Well, I went to city manager 2 or 3 times and tried to get something done and couldn't get it done behind closed doors, so I got to air it out here in the public to try to get something done. So I kind of like the process of, you know, let's all, and it's on paper, it's a record, it's in his file, whatever, if we need it, and we can give him a raise that way. That's just my thought.
Mr. Bagby.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think we're conflating a couple of things here. If you pull up the little diagram, okay, if you all remember that, the mayor doesn't evaluate the city manager. Mr. Destin is correct. The council evaluates the city manager because he works for the council. And we all, if you look in November, council members may elect to meet individually with the city manager to discuss the city manager's performance during the previous fiscal year. Note, should council member elect to use the performance evaluation form, it shall be signed and retained by the city manager. Don't even have to use the form. Mayor's not mentioned anywhere in there. Where the mayor has come in the past is in the compensation, because in December, the city manager shall meet and provide the mayor with copies of completed evaluation forms. 7 of them, not 8 of them, 7 of them. And basically, the mayor, who got background information from the HR director on comparable salaries, everything, does what? He says, okay, you bring a recommendation for compensation, not evaluation. The mayor's not evaluating the city manager. We are, or we're not. It's your personal decision. I always did, and I always met. I think I got away from filling out the form because I think there was a public records request at one point in the past, and then we had a city manager who, people were just putting honest assessments and saying, you really messed this up and you really did this, and it was like, whoa, why are we still have this person there? Well, anybody that evaluates people understands, you have that frank conversation. So I got away from writing it down and just having a frank conversation and just scoring. That's all I did. But the mayor doesn't do the evaluation. He doesn't even really aggregate the evaluation. He makes a recommendation on compensation based on the forms the city manager gives him or her in the past.
Jim, just a question. Couldn't that be construed as polling? Because he's compiling all of our decisions ahead of a vote?
But he's not evaluating, he's not tallying, he's going to make a recommendation. You're above average or you're below average. If you're above average, you should get a raise. I would think in a normal year, if you're below average, you might get a cost of living raise, but you don't get a performance bonus, or I wouldn't call it a performance raise in compensation. So that's all I would say.
All right, Mr. Smith would like to.
I was just gonna, I hear Mr. Bagby saying, and it sounds good, but the problem is when we get to that point, if the mayor prepares a recommendation, the previous step says we don't have to use the form. So what if 6 of us don't use the form and only 1 of us did? Then he's still gonna be in a position of having 1 form to prepare his recommendation, and then, so.
Again, he's not tallying.
No,
He's
I know,
saying-
but there's no forms. There's only 1.
If he has no forms, you know what he does? He still asks the HR director, what's the comparable position make? How much of a raise? How much of a raise did the staff get? If the staff got a 3% raise, 1.5 cost of living and 1.5 performance bonus on average, I would think the city manager probably ought to get a 3%, unless he really excelled or really unexcelled, That's the mayor's recommendation is on compensation. It's not on the city manager's evaluation. That's just my.
Mr. Destin, if you'll hold off just one second. Basically, Kyle would probably like a motion. We kind of put the cart before the horse here a little bit. So I'll entertain a motion to either his recommendation or maybe Mr.
I'll make a
Bagby's.
motion to follow what Kyle's recommendation was and go from there.
Okay.
Can you
Now,
repeat what that
Ray,
was?
Ray, are you following this motion here real quick?
Will you repeat it, please?
Kyle.
Yeah, okay, let me rephrase it. So it's really twofold. One would be the evaluation form that Webb and Nicole put together and put in there. You'd be approving that, and we'd fold that into the resolution. The second is to amend the resolution such that the evaluation forms are simply provided from the council and the mayor, if you want to include that. I hate to throw that in at the last minute, but he is an elected official, and in this scenario, he would not be recommending a raise, so if you want to include him, you can, to the HR manager who simply tabulates the numbers. We take those back to a council at an open public meeting, and then we see how the sausage gets made.
You can leave out the sausage making part, Ray. So that is the motion, and I had a second. And y'all want to vote? Go ahead, sir. You have the right, but after that, I'd like to wrap this up. We'll go ahead and vote on it. Go
I
ahead.
don't blame you a bit. I would just say with all due respect, Mr. Bagby is trying to pound a round peg into a square hole. Under the charter, the mayor is not an executive officer. He chairs the meetings. He also gets to take part in discussion and votes if there's a tie, but he does not make motions and he does not make recommendations that are binding. So, you know, the only executive we have is our city manager. So that's why I would be in favor of the motion as it stands.
All righty then, we're gonna stop with that and take a vote on the motion. Dr. Ramswell. She's confirmed.
I hit the mic instead of confirm.
Ayes have it. So moved. I did count right. Yes. All right. Thank you, counsel. It's always a good idea to follow our legal counsel's lead, especially if he has to defend us in court. All righty then. So, last but not least, we will wind up tonight's.
Actually, Mayor, I thought Kyle had
Did
something
you have
he was going to
something else,
present on my
or-
behalf. No?
No?
If you'd like to discuss that, I don't mind it, but, you know, I'll leave it to your discretion. Do you want me to discuss?
Sure. Well, so I had sent an email about a week ago to Kyle, and I copied council and the city manager requesting legal, well, let me actually, so I'm not like stuttering here. Essentially, Florida courts state that any elected official is entitled to legal representation at public expense. And so my request was to have the city cover my legal expenses going into this so I can retain an attorney. And so that's what I had presented, and that was my request.
And so in response to that, you know, anytime, I wear several hats in the city as city attorney. Any city attorney does. We have ethical duties to individual council members. We have ethical duties to the governing body as a whole. We have ethical duties to the municipal corporation. So anytime there is potentially situations where the interests of those three parties don't align, I simply can't provide advice to any of those three entities individually. So what Lance and Webb and I did is we spoke with our labor attorney, Rob Larkin, who's very well respected and has done this before for other city attorneys and county attorneys throughout the state and is familiar with this area of law. And he informed us that he will look at this and simply provide the city a memorandum, hopefully sometime towards the end of this week, that will describe to the city what its duties are, its obligations are, and what it has the ability to do in this circumstance, both at this stage and at the stage where if Councilmember Ramswell were successful in her defense, what the obligations would be at that point. So that's where we are, and I'm not going to provide any advice on that tonight.
Okay, I understand that. I did come prepared, though, with complete case law and support showing that it literally is not contingent on outcome. It's simply about us being entitled to having legal representation. And so I am prepared to present all of that. It's not whether it's criminal or civil, and it's not a matter of after the fact or before the fact. It's literally at any point. It's entitled to legal representation. So I just want to make that clear, and I'm happy to provide the AGOs and the cases that are in support of that.
Mr. Bagby.
Yeah, what did our insurance?
That's what we're waiting on.
That's what we have to wait for.
And that's a good question.
No, that's our labor attorney. Our insurance,
We turned the matter over to our labor attorney,
Okay.
but we also, Webb and Nicole and I did this afternoon, actually, and probably I meant to update you on this, but it was late in the afternoon. We had a discussion with our insurance carrier today, and we informed them that we will be submitting a claim on behalf of Councilmember Ramswell. He said, you know, they will look at it at that time. I don't have any more information at this time.
Okay, I mean, by our process or procedures we just adopted, this would be on the next council agenda. Is that correct? Unless we had a supermajority vote tonight to consider.
I mean, if y'all would like to place it on the next agenda, you can. I think you need to make sure that you've got the advice from Rob Larkin, though. I would not advise acting without that advice.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we don't think we can get that in 2 weeks?
He said middle to end of this week that he thought he would have it. So assuming that we have that, we can put it on the agenda, I guess. And
Yeah, I would just ask that we put it on the agenda unless we don't have that opinion. Then I would like to know why we don't have that opinion.
Mr. Braden?
So refresh my memory again as to how this labor attorney would be an expert as far as a council member having legal representation from the city when they are innocent until proven guilty.
it's not a matter of expertise. It's simply a matter of there's a body of law, which Councilmember Ramswell has read some of, which relates to when a public agency has a duty or an ability to provide things like criminal defense retainers to a public official accused of a crime within the scope of their duty or outside the scope of their duty.
Then he really doesn't seem like the person we need to be talking with if we need an expert or...
He's perfectly competent. I think Mr. Destin could describe his expertise actually on this area too. He's worked on this issue with several agencies, including the school district, the Oaks County School District throughout the state.
That was exactly what my comment was going to be. He's worked on these very issues with the school district, and he worked with the city of Destin for the last 20 years or better, 25, and the head of his firm is a Mr. Norton, who is also an expert in the field. So I'm looking very forward to see what they tell us, because the whole issue begs the question of the risk that all of us take while serving up here and the exposure that we face every time we make a decision. And I'm interested to know what it is that can be done to try to lessen that. So I look forward to his opinion.
I want to know, I want to hear something, and I hope he brings us something back. You know, I don't want just his opinion. He says, well, I've looked into it and this is my opinion, because we all have different opinions. You got a different opinion on it. Ms. Cobb's got a different opinion on it. Now if he's got a third opinion on it, but I want something, he can bring us something back in concrete that says this is why we can't do it, or this is why we can do it. Is what I would be looking for, not because, well, I've looked into it and this is my opinion. You better off not.
My understanding is, and maybe Lance and Webb have a different understanding, but I believe he's preparing a legal memorandum which will have a conclusion stating what you can and cannot do, and will have the reasoning and analysis as to why you can and cannot do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, we'll take it up then. All right, so we'll move on to item 8, public comments. Come on up, Marcy. Saw you stand up first. Nobody else is charging the podium. Yep.
It's almost done. Let's see if you can do it.
Just throw elbows high. Go ahead.
Marcy Bell, 3 Gulf Breeze Court. I know what agenda meetings are about. I know that you have them with staff. I don't know that the public understands why that isn't public information. Meaning, as I'm sitting back there, I'm thinking I'm going to get a message from somebody that's going to say, what do you mean the city council members have agenda meetings and we're not privy to that because we're the public? I'm just putting that out there. I'm not asking you to answer. I only am looking at you because you were the one who keeps saying, I get all these answers in my agenda meetings. But they might be questions that the citizens want to know as well. So that's the only reason I'm bringing that up. In reference to, I'm sorry?
The public's privy to our decision-making process and...
Can they see every bit of it right here on live TV?
Right,
Yeah.
but she
I
was
know- I
saying
see
that a
your
lot of
point.
things are answered for her that somebody else might have. Oh. Right. Right, and I'm getting to the next part of that. I just want to tell you guys real quick about Compass. So if you want to volunteer, I use it all the time. I can tell you the problems that I find with it, that I call and speak to Matthew Pace about. Ray helps me all the time when I can't find things, but if I find difficulties within the system as a user, outside user, I'm the one who can tell you about it most of the time. Citizen participation. You want citizen participation. You are not going to get citizen participation when the citizens are afraid to come and talk to you. When the citizens are afraid to come and talk to you and send you text messages or call you or send you an email or whatever it is, and they find themselves on the opposite end of a lawsuit because they want to know something or they're looking into something that concerns them because it's in their backyard, you are not going to get citizen participation. I'm a brave soul up here every time I come up here. Every single time I come up here, I am a brave soul. You see them all? There's how many of us left in the room? You are not going to get citizen participation when they feel that they're going to be taken down because not one single one of you gets paid to do this job. Not one. Kyle, no disrespect. There is no comparison to what happened at the school board to what's happening here. She was a paid elected official. Not one of these elected officials is paid. This city, well, regardless, there's no comparison. She was paid. Y'all aren't paid. Y'all are up here doing this because you volunteer your time and put yourself out there. I mean, anyways, that was just the last thing I wanted to say was, yeah.
Marcy, give us a list of your Compass failures. Yeah. Workarounds. I'm serious about that. You can just send me an email and give me the list. Cool. Well, there you go. Everybody on this dais would like to see that list.
It's not, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not pointing fingers.
No, that's what we talked about tonight. We want to find the problem and solve it. And the best way to do that is have outside eyes looking in. All right. Anyone else? Seeing none. We did pretty good tonight. I want to thank the council and all participants. Meeting adjourned.